Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the October 25th, 2021 Governance and Priorities Committee meeting. We are holding this meeting on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk today is Ms. Sheila Gurry, and today's Governance and Priorities Committee meeting will be held in accordance with the Community Charter and Council Procedure Bylaw 2018 number 7272. As the province is now in phase 3 of the opening plan, question period is being reinstated for those in attendance for agenda items only. The question period sign-up sheet is on the table by the double doors to my left. If during the meeting any member of the gallery has a question regarding an agenda item, please write down your name and the agenda item on the sheet. At the start of question period, the chair will call those who have signed up to the podium to address council. The first item on the agenda is the introduction of late items. Ms. Gurry.
Thank you, Chair. For late items today, agenda item 6A1, Reimagine Nanaimo Phase 2 update, adding a delegation from Daniel Appel. Agenda item 6B11, Diana Krall Plaza redevelopment plan, add a delegation from Daniel Appel. Agenda item 6B12, Commercial Street Revitalization Study Update, add a delegation from Daniel Appel. And agenda item 6B13, Downtown Hub Project Update, add delegations from Daniel Appel, Carla Sampson, Grant Payne, and Kevin Shaw. And that's it, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Gurry. I would need a motion to adopt the agenda as amended. Moved by Councillor Martman, seconded by Councillor Hemmens. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? See none opposed. Motion carries. We have one set of minutes. We need a motion to adopt them as circulated. Moved by Councillor Hemmens, second by Councillor Martman. Any errors, omissions, discussions? Call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 5, Governance and Priorities Committee Agenda Planning. Ms. Gurry.
Thank you again, Chair. So starting on page 10 of your agenda is the Governance and Priorities Committee agenda planning documents. Page 10 outlines some of the subject matter that is planned for the remainder of the Governance and Priorities Committee meetings this year. And then there are some on the next page that are still yet to be scheduled, as well as a calendar of all of the meetings that you've had this year and a list of previous topics covered. So at this point in your agenda in this process, you can ask any questions that you might have about any of the upcoming topics, as well as any additional topics that you wish to have staff prepare for and bring forward for your discussion at GPC. So I'm willing to hear any other items that might be coming forward, and we can add those to the agenda for future GPC meetings and try to get those scheduled as soon as possible.
Thank you, Ms. Gurry. Councillor Hemmens.
I think it's on. I would like to add a subject for GPC on housing affordability, and I would like staff to reference and speak to the Langford model, the article which was shared with staff last week. I'd also like conversation around the affordable housing strategy and what it says about affordability. I note as a council we've had some really good movement on the supportive housing end and looking for more conversation on affordability. I'm also curious, and I don't know if this would be pertinent to this conversation, but a discussion of rezonings reverting back to the original land use if nothing has happened after a certain amount of time, say 2 years. And if that's inappropriate for that conversation, perhaps staff could indicate that and I'll just follow up one-on-one.
I'd go to staff here before we get to a motion to add an agenda topic, but I think they would be separate items. But Mr. Lindsay?
Through the chair, I think certainly that item or that question has come up in the past and it's never been connected directly with housing, the housing question. So I think certainly we could touch on it within the context of housing and housing affordability, but yes, it's probably is a separate topic that could be addressed at another time.
Okay, then I would, if I may, just stick with the original, and I'll follow up on the other.
So is that, just so we're clear, a motion to have a GPC
On housing affordability.
including details on the Langford model?
Langford and any other, I understand North Van is also coming out with some programs. So just a bit of an environmental scan of innovation in housing affordability in municipalities.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Martman. Any discussion, Council? Councillor Bonner. You're muted.
Are you hearing me now?
We can hear you.
Yeah, no, my question is for the question later on, sorry. I'm in favor of the motion.
Okay. Any further discussion, Council? Call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Opposed? Opposed, Councillor Turley. Any other items, Council? Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Chair. I just question on the pedestrian crossing prioritization, 30-minute presentation. Do we know what that's going to be about, and are we going to be discussing policy on this, or is it just staff telling us what's happening?
Mr. Sims?
Sorry, I missed the question, Your Worship, or Mr. Chair.
The question, Councillor Bonner, if you could repeat the question.
Yes, it was just regarding the pedestrian crossing prioritization. It's a 30-minute presentation. Are we going to be discussing policy on it, or are we just looking at hearing something from staff on what's happening?
Sorry, yes, Mr. Chair, that is intended to be along the lines of the existing prioritization system, present some information on some changes to that system, and just how this is approached from staff. So seeking that direction from council will, in effect, be a policy. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Mr. Sims. Councillor Martman.
Just to follow up on that, I'm wondering if we can get information on our sidewalks and our prioritization and where we are.
Mr. Sims.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. To Councillor Martman, we can do that as part of the capital planning process, and I think as the active transportation plan starts to roll out to the GPC and to council, that'll become more and more apparent. But this helps, all part of that network.
Okay.
Any other items, Council? Seeing none, we will get on to a very full agenda. Item 6A, Reimagine Nanaimo. This is the Phase 2 update. Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Council. This afternoon we have a Phase 2 update. I know one slight change to your agenda. It says Ms. Paulsing will be presenting. Ms. Constable's actually with us this afternoon, and she's going to run you very quickly through this update.
Ms. Cronstall, welcome.
It's nice to be here with a bit of an audience. So, Phase 2, where are we at? We are in the waning days of Phase 2. As you know, public engagement closed on September 23rd, and we're right now doing all of the analysis so we can get you a summary report as we did with Phase 1 on all the wonderful feedback that we got during Phase 2. But we weren't going to be focusing so much on that today. Instead, we're going to be giving you a little bit of a look under the hood on the policy review we've had going underway for the last few months with staff with some public input, as well as a look at the evolving thoughts on the action plan that will accompany City Plan in terms of the structure. Finally, we'll wrap up with a bit on next steps and the timeline. So not a huge presentation, but hopefully one that will answer some of the questions you've had in previous presentations and stimulate a bit of thought. So, Corey, one of our staff, this is Bike to Work Week with one of his kids, a very successful effort by the part of transportation staff this year. So the policy review, we realized we hadn't really given much of an update so far on what all the various departments are doing, because this is a huge effort. This is the first time we've done an integrated city plan review. So everybody is looking at their main planning documents, the Transportation Master Plan, the Official Community Plan, the Parks, Recreation, and Culture Master Plan. The key staff involved are looking at those documents in this huge Excel sheet of every policy and looking, where does this need to be revised or updated? where should it be removed because it's been completed or it's outdated, or where should this be kept as it is because there are some things that we haven't completed we want to keep. But they're also looking at every secondary policy document, the Bevan Park Master Plan, the Affordable Housing Strategy, and saying, where should some of these policies really be promoted into city plan, or where should they be moved into this supporting action plan that we're going to talk about, and where should they just stay in a secondary planning document? So this has been an effort that's been ongoing for months. All the different departments are involved, and we're now sort of in step 3, where we're looking at some of the policy gaps that have been identified, doing policy on things like diversity and inclusion, and other areas where we've identified clear gaps, and sorting these policies into whether they're going to go into city plan or one of the supporting action plans, or remain in some secondary plan like the economic development strategy. So the last step after that will be categorizing all these different policies under the 5 goals, which will be consistent through city plan and the action plans. So that's a bit of a mouthful, but I just sort of wanted to give you a sense of all the work that's going across all the different departments to make sure that everything that's good in these plans that's still ongoing is kept, and that where we can organize things between the overarching policy and the implementation pieces and putting those all together. So, engagement summary, we're just at the part where we're identifying some early themes, but we are using those to inform the policy work that's ongoing, and we're also finalizing the draft targets and indicators that we've put so much work into during phase 1. We're hoping to come back to you in November with a full engagement summary. We do know we had 2,220 estimated participants in phase 2. Weird, lots of 2s. As I think Lisa's mentioned in the past, our phenomenal response to the MetroQuest interactive survey that we really want to credit Lanark for using that new tool, well, new for us anyways, and over 1,500 people did what was a fairly involved survey on the scenarios, so that was really good participation, and almost 500 people on the foundation's feedback form. And of course, lots of workshop participants as well. We also had those 2 representative workshops where we had people who were selected proportionally to the population so we could compare the feedback we got from those workshops from those who were self-selected. So that will be part of the analysis that we give you in November. Any questions on that section? I'm going a little quick, but okay. So moving on to the action plan, I understand the last GPC there was a little bit of talk about this idea of the orange, the supporting action plans under the integrated city plan, but we have a new graphic for you today, which hopefully will explain a little bit more how these things all fit together. So here we have the overarching city plan. It structures all decisions, including form policy for our city with the goals as the foundation, those 5 goals you see along the top there. Under there is connected is council's strategic plan. Obviously, council sets its own priorities, but may be informed by the city plan. And connected to that is the integrated action plan, which houses all of our policies and programs that we aspire to implement to support those goals, brought together in one place holistically. We also have the monitoring plan, which is kept separate from the city plan because we don't want to be amending the city plan all the time, but we do want to be tracking and monitoring. So we have the monitoring plan. And then we have these supporting plans. I gave the example of the economic development strategy, provides context and rationale behind some of these priority items. So not everything is going to be in either city plan or the action plans, there will still be some other plans that we have, but we're going to, as much as we can, keep things consistent so that we can refer to one document for our main policy priorities. Now, what would that look like in practical terms? We have a goal, overarching. We have our associated big goal, city plan policy. In the action plans, we'll have the policies, projects, and programs. So the policies in the action plan with their secondary, more specific policies. We'll have projects, which will have a geographic location. And we'll have things like Bike to Work Week, which are a program. And they'll be organized into Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. Tier 1 being within the next 10 years, Tier 2, 10 to 20 years, and Tier 3 being beyond 20 years. And associated with that, targets and indicators. That is kind of the organization we're thinking right now for the action plan. For example, thriving waterfront, goal, and empowered Nanaimo. Our current big policy, create and maintain public access to Nanaimo's waterfront and encourage its use. This is an existing policy example, so please on this focus on the structure and not the content, because this is all still a work in progress in terms of the content. Action plan policies, here is some examples of some specific policies that would support that goal, and there's the target. This is a high-level target. We may get more granular in terms of specifics, but you can see that's kind of how it flows. Another example, Green Nanaimo. These are taken from the Climate Change Resilience Strategy, some suggestions for promoting things out of the climate strategy into the city plan, improve cities' agility for responding and recovering to climate-related hazard events, and then some specific action plan policies. And those may get yet more specific as we do work. So those are just some examples of what this could look like, because I know it's been a bit nebulous in the past discussions about what's city plan versus what's action plan and how do these things relate to our existing documents. So it is evolving for us as well, but we wanted to give you a sense of where we're at. This is just an example of, we could have in city plan, or sorry, in the action plan, some maps that show geographically where projects would be located, so that you can get a sense of where the distribution is. This is an example. As you can see, I'm a little bit worried about being questioned on the details of the waterfront projects. Don't know. The plans are under construction. It is very much going at a fast pace. It's been a pretty aggressive timeline for us. It's very exciting. It's a totally new type of process for us, and it's been just phenomenal to work across departments. In terms of the next steps, as I mentioned, we're hoping to get the engagement analysis to you in November. The policy review work is still ongoing, and I know there's efforts to organize committee workshops for both the Environment and the Accessibility Committee, and some of the new draft policies we're coming up with. Those 3 land use scenarios are still being looked at in terms of blending a land use scenario for final consideration, all feeding into the draft city plan and draft action plan that will be coming back to you shortly. And I believe Council has a tentative workshop date in December. This is the project timeline as it stands today. Engagement summary November, going back out to the public with the draft city plan in January, final revisions and partner referrals in March with an aim to have it adopted in April. Now, saying that partner referrals in March, we've been talking to our partners all along, of course, so there hopefully be no surprises, but there is a formal referral process for this type of plan that we'd be going through once we have the final document. There's our familiar old timeline. Okay, that takes us to the end of our PowerPoint for today. Do you have any thoughts?
Thanks, Ms. Cronstal. I have Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Cronstal, can you confirm for me, when we're doing the overall city plan and then the integrated action plans, those plans that aren't incorporated in this big planning, is it because they don't need updating, and when they do, they'll be incorporated in the broader piece, or is it just that they're secondary and they'll always remain so?
Well, there are some plans, like if we take the affordable housing strategy, for example, there are some policies in there that we're elevating to city plan, but we're still going to have the document and still be using it as a working document, but some elements of it will be taken into the action plan, some elements of it will be taken to city plan. So it's really about prioritization, so that if someone looks across and say broad strokes, what are the city's priorities, you can look in one place instead of having to refer to 10 different documents. But those documents we're not going to just get rid of those documents. They'll still be there.
Okay, great. And one other question, if I may, just in terms of the donut, can I confirm that staff have added political voice as one of the components of it?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Although there's not a specific metric, we're still in discussion as to which the best metrics would be.
Okay, thank you.
Council, any other? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Cronstal. Appreciate the update. And we do have one delegation on this item, Mr. Daniel Appel. If you could please come to the podium, and you have 5 minutes to present the committee.
With your indulgence, Chairman, I would rather speak to all 4 of the planning issues that I'm booked for in one block. I think if I do that, I could be a lot briefer.
I think we're going to have to take them one by one.
One by one?
Yep.
Okay, I'll start with this one then. Can I take off the mask?
Absolutely,
Okay.
yes. Whatever your comfort level.
I know my voice doesn't carry well. I thank you for that. Okay, I have really some brief comments about this, and they're related to the letter that I wrote to council after the first engagement process. And that I expressed some concerns related to the fact that there was not really any useful data being gathered from the public with that engagement process. It was more like a validation process. It wasn't gathering information that could be incorporated into the plan. And Councillor Armstrong replied and said straight out, well, what questions would you ask for a public engagement? And I thought, wow, that would be a challenge. So I thought up a question, and then I thought up another question, and I thought up another question, and pretty soon I thought I had a pretty good comprehensive survey that I sent to council as well after that. And Armstrong's response was, thank you, and she took this to the planning committee. She said she took this to the planning committee, and they responded that these types of questions were more appropriate in phase 2 of the survey. In fact, phase 2's been, the engagement process is pretty much over, and I didn't see any of that at all. In fact, I saw really more questions directed at getting validation, not information. My personal view is that's just the wrong approach as far as public engagement goes. And I was wondering what happened.
That's the question to the committee?
Yeah.
Well, typically this is meant for the committees to ask you questions, but council, if there's questions for Mr. Appel, feel free. I don't see any, Mr. Appel, so.
Okay. Can I get an answer?
You're more than welcome to follow up with staff
Here or?
at a separate time. Yes, outside.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, council, if there's any additional items on the reimagine? I don't, okay. I see none, so we will move on. Item B, under the community wellness livability, downtown update regarding the Diana Krall Plaza redevelopment plan. Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I know your agenda package says that I'll be speaking a number of times today, but I promise I'll do it just this one time because we really are excited to be back in front of you today to talk about the downtown. And specifically, we've packaged this together because there's 3 projects that we've been working on or at various stages, and we thought it was an opportunity to update council. This is the 3rd time, I believe, if memory serves, that we've been at a GPC talking about downtown. I don't need to remind council that downtown is one of your key action items in your strategic plan. And one of the action items specifically talks about investment in the downtown. So this is part of that continuation of that work that I think started, Mr. Corson will speak to it better, but I think it started well over a year and a half ago or very, very early in your term. So some updates on projects that you set us down a path on early on, and then some newer initiatives that council's been supportive of. So we'll start the day off with Mr. Corson will provide some context and then introduce Dave Whitty, who's our first presentation this afternoon, and followed up by 2 further presentations by Mr. Corson and Mr. Sims, just talking about specific projects. But really, I think council will see today that there's 3 different projects, but very much coordinated and very much working together on this goal of improvements in the downtown core. So again, excited to be here this afternoon, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Corson.
Mr. Corson.
Great. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so just following up on Mr. Lindsay there, back in July of 2019, you remember we had our first GPC about downtown, and we kind of looked at all the various issues that council was hoping that staff would address, and one of those was Diana Krall Plaza, and acknowledging that that area required attention and the need to come up with a bit of a game plan for it. And at that time, council allocated funding towards that, and we were very fortunate to get Dr. Whitty involved to be able to lead this process. And of course, with Dr. Whitty, you get the resourcing of the community planning program at VIU as well, which was just excellent. So we started the process quite quickly in late 2019, and then of course the pandemic hit. So we kind of got off to a good start, and then we put it on pause for a while, and then we were able to finish it up just in the late spring this summer. So Dr. Whitty is here. He's going to take you through all the work that was done and give you the full background on on Diana Krall and also provide you with some recommendations. And like Mr. Lindsay mentioned, what we're really trying to do is take the good work that's been done here and the other engagement work through Reimagine and through the Hub project and really be able to tie everything back together. So we have kind of this one plan for downtown, which ties into your capital planning and helps give us some direction in terms of how to implement these things. Certainly recognizing that downtown is a priority. So Dr. Whitty asked that I provide you just a quick introduction. So we all know him very well, but the folks at home might not be familiar with Dave. So Dave was the former provost and vice president for Vancouver Island University from 2010 to 2018. Prior to that, Dave was the dean at the Faculty of Architecture at the University of Manitoba. And before that, he was a director and partner in urban systems. Dave moved to BC in 1991, and he was a senior partner in Hilderman, Whitney and Associates, who were an award-winning planning and landscape architecture firm with offices in Winnipeg and Saskatoon. Dave is a founding director of Smart Growth BC, former president of the Canadian Institute of Planners, and founding chair of the Canadian Health and Communities Project. He was elected a fellow in the Canadian Institute of Planners in 1998. Between 2002 and 2014, he sat on the National Capital Commission's Advisory Committee on Planning, Design, and Real Estate. He was a recipient of Manitoba Southeast Tribal Council Recognition of Service to First Nations. In 2016, he received the CIP President's Award in recognition of outstanding lifetime contribution to the professional planning practice in Canada. Dave is a life member of the Royal Architecture Institute of Canada and an honorary member of the Council of Canadian Urbanism. In 2019, he was awarded a life member of the Planning Institute of BC, and Dave is currently senior fellow urban design at Vancouver Island University. So certainly we got a good person to help us on this project, and very, very qualified. Dave has brought with him Soniel Desmuk, who's one of the former planning students at VIU, and she really helped coordinate a lot of the VIU students and work with Dave on this project. So really excited to have her here today as well to kind of present this to you, Council. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Mr. Corson, and welcome to both of you.
Thanks, Bill. It's good to be back here. It's been a while. So we're going to run through the work that was done, and we'll talk about the people involved at a little bit later. But this is and has potential to be a magical place, and so we're going to talk about how that might actually happen. I think for us the key word is animation and the lack thereof. And all of us that travel and visit places of note, Lima, Peru here to Freiburg, to Stockholm, Barcelona, Basel, one of my favorite places ever. But these are all well animated as showing here. And it's clearly, when we take a look at Diana Krall Plaza, not so. So what are some of the basics? It would seem to us that it does need inherently to be animated. And secondly, it needs to address Reimagine Nanaimo's vision for a healthy downtown, which is progressing quite nicely. Needs some careful strategic investments. And it needs to acknowledge that Diana Krall is world famous and deserves to be celebrated. About 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, sitting in Shanghai in Pudong, having lunch with Marg, and a Diana Krall CD came on and played for a good hour as we sat there on the Yangtze River. 20 years ago. So well known across the world, and I don't think we've done the right service to that name here. It does need to be connected more fully to the downtown and its core elements. And so early on, I'm kind of like to do these concepts to get my head going. And so when I approached Bill and the city and suggested that we could perhaps get a framework started, these are my initial notes that I put together, but you see at the top, AC, that's an advisory committee, and okay, consultation obviously is critical. We need to look at some of the past work. You know me, I love ideas forums, so we had an ideas forum central to this. And then we developed a concept, and you'll see on the other side, other stuff. Well, obviously, that was done early on. We did some other stuff, which we'll get to later. And then design and then build out. And then we're thinking about maybe council could do something in October 2020, but a year later because of COVID, here we are. So Diana Krall Plaza is situated central to the downtown. Library, CCU, Port Theatres, we know, but it's a bit of a challenging site because it's elongated. It's not a typical piazza that you would see in Italy, for instance, and so this elongation creates a bit of a challenge, but it creates some huge opportunities because nearby Coast Bastion, the new Marriott, the Art Gallery, the Conference Center, Commercial Street. So with the right kind of connections, we think that there could be some good things happen here. So what are the first impressions? Well, literally, this is what happens when you walk through in a summer day. It's empty. The other thing that you notice is it's isolated. You know, there's stairwells around it. It's hidden. People who are new to the city have no idea that there's a plaza there. No idea. On the waterfront, there's absolutely no idea. As you can see that there's some really good things happening along the waterfront, absolutely. But the connection through the plaza just doesn't exist. So first impressions, huge opportunity with the Marriott under construction. This is an early sketch I did a walk through, and I just thought, okay, for me, there's like these 4 areas that have potential within the plaza itself, and then you see some arrows and thinking, yeah, you know, there's some connection there. Yeah, this is going to be a fun project. So all of that to say, put together a brief in November 2019. I did this work pro bono. I'm honored to do it. And I think this, if you could read this paragraph, and it encapsulates the reason why I put forward the idea. So Bill said, yeah, this is a good idea, go for it. So we put together a process. This outlines the presentation today, so the overview, some of what we've done, provides some background to the work, key building blocks, design process, and a preferred concept. So we're bringing a preferred concept to you today. In terms of overview, certainly a dynamic exterior as we know it, lots of potential to connect through, and lots of busy activity on the exterior of Diana Krall as we know it. Again, though, the site itself really avoids space. And I promise you, I didn't actually go and tell everybody who was here to leave. This was a random walkthrough. Boy, I've walked through this many times, and this is how it appears most of the time. Calling out for people, animation. The site itself has limited uses. That's part of the problem. There's the Coastal Community Credit Union, obviously, and their head office, library, and then public toilet, and also then a minimal, what I would say, homage to Diana Krall, but not much else. In fact, not anything else. So we put together a work plan, as Bill mentioned. The idea was that we'd end up before you a year ago. So we gathered existing material. We met those previously involved. There have been lots of involvement, and I participated in when we had the Royal Architectural Institute of Canada here. We had a charrette done for downtown, including Diana Krall Plaza, so we had that information. Created an advisory committee. So from the Chamber, Kim Smythe, downtown business reps, Gemma Martin from Gabriel's, Sean Gee from CCCU, from the City Bill. Citizen nominee was Laura Augustine. Planning, Design, Development, and NIVA was myself. Vancouver Island chapter of the Royal Architectural Institute of Canada was Alfred Korpusuk. Regional Library Downtown Branch, Anthony Martin. Art Gallery, Carolyn Holmes. And Petroglyph Development Corporation, Ian Simpson. And then from VIU, from the Master Community Planning, Dr. Pam Shaw. So that committee met when we could, and then COVID shut us down, obviously, in April 2020. But before that, we were able to identify design parameters and undertake our site context, which was completed by the students of VIU. We developed a detailed plan once we could reboot in June through August, and then an implementation plan to be recommended here today for you to consider 2022 onwards. So what are the key building blocks? So now it's going to talk about context analysis. Another key building block was the ideas forum, which I'm really keen on using in processes. She'll talk about the results from that. She'll talk about the business survey we did, and then did a review of successful squares that exist across the globe. Learning from others is always an important thing. We talked about and received, thank you very much, from the city, a structural engineering opinion. We'll talk about the results of that letter. We developed guiding principles at the advisory committee. We completed a charrette where we prepared concept plans and then went up on a website seeking feedback. And then lastly, we prepared a preferred plan. So I'll call on Sonal to review the next 3 items.
Thank you, Dave. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for your time today. I would like to speak to some of the initial work that we did that guided the final designs of this for the plaza. Let's start with the context analysis first. In January 2020, Masters of Community Planning students from Vancouver Island University, along with Dr. Dave Whitty, spent the entire morning in downtown mapping out the existing opportunities and constraints of the Diana Krall Plaza with respect to the surrounding neighboring context. I would like to briefly talk about these parameters one by one. The first map that you see on the left shows the land use around the plaza within a 10-minute walking proximity. The zone in yellow is DT2, designated for mixed office and retail use. The zone in red is DT1, for shopping, clubs, cultural and entertainment use. Orange is DT6 for commercial community, and brown is DT7 for residential, commercial community, and office use. The second map on the right here shows nodes, view corridors, and landmarks around the plaza. On the map, you can see the 3 main nodes shown in green circles, connecting the commercial street to Bastion Street and Front Street. There are several downtown landmarks around the plaza, such as the Port Theatre, the library, the art gallery, Gabriel's Cafe, the Coast Hotel, and many more. There is also a view of the waterfront, where that airspace parcel is located towards the Front Street, that should be utilized to its full potential. The map on the left here shows the pedestrian movement, with red dotted lines showing light pedestrian traffic and blue showing heavy foot traffic. The presence of different activities and services on Commercial Street, carefully designed sidewalks with trees and benches, use of more pedestrian-friendly materials on sidewalks adds to the user experience. While the Museum Way is often used, Wharf Street does not feel safe to walk due to the absence of activities. The map on the right here shows the permeability of adjacent structures. The presence of diverse services like retail, restaurants, coffee shops, etc. on Commercial Street with welcoming facades offers great permeability for people visiting downtown. When it comes to the permeability of the plaza is enclosed by 4 built structures: the library, Coastal Community Credit Union, Port Theatre, and the Coast Bastion Hotel. The glass facades of the library and the CCCU building offers good permeability. However, library being a public building contributes the most towards it. When we walk into the central core of the plaza, the blank walls of the Bastion Hotel and the Port Theatre creates unwelcoming spaces in the remaining 2/3 of the plaza. The map on the left talks about the accessibility of the plaza. Located in the heart of downtown, the plaza is accessible from all 4 sides. Access from Commercial Street is the most ideal for people with mobility concerns due to the absence of ramps and elevators on the other 3 sides. The plaza acts as an important connection between the Commercial Street and the waterfront, and as Dave said before, currently this connection is not explored to its full potential. The map on the right shows the downtown road network. The green lines show heavy road traffic, blue shows medium, and red shows light traffic. As you can see in the map, the plaza is very well connected with the adjacent road network, and due to a good peripheral road network, the fast-moving traffic does not penetrate to Commercial Street, allowing great opportunities for pedestrian movement. Moving on to the Ideas Forum community event that was held in March 2020. This event was an opportunity for the DKP Advisory Committee to connect with the Nanaimo community for an evening of discussions, creative brainstorming, and hands-on visioning for the future of Diana Krall Plaza. The Masters of Community Planning students helped facilitate this event and gathered valuable feedback from the community. The attendees worked together in groups. There were 3 groups. These are the key findings of Group 1. This group envisioned the plaza to be interactive all the way through, with ample lighting, seating, art and culture, and more green spaces. The collaboration of library, art gallery, Port Theatre, museum, and Sinamuk First Nations were considered significant in promoting art and learning through programming. Spaces like kiosks, pop-up spaces, food trucks, temporary retail space were given emphasis to encourage activity. According to Group 2, to draw people in the plaza should be active in all seasons, hence weather-responsive designs were explored. The need of a strong connectivity of the plaza with the surrounding built forms, such as the library and waterfront, were emphasized. The importance of social media and technology was also explored to draw people in. This group envisioned the development of plaza into 3 zones. Zone 1 was accessed by Commercial Street to draw people in the plaza with the help of art and music, ample green and seating spaces. The central core of the plaza was imagined to be activated by efficient programming. And the 3rd zone, closest to the front street, was envisioned to incorporate Indigenous representation. Moving on to the business survey. A brief survey was sent to the businesses in downtown Nanaimo in early February 2020 to understand the strengths and opportunities of being located in downtown and the role Diana Krall Plaza plays in the greater downtown ecosystems. A total of 22 responses were collected, representing a range of businesses located in downtown's commercial core. These were the key advantages and issues that came up in the survey. When asked how to make the Diana Krall Plaza more vibrant, these were the key themes that came up. 90% of respondents considered DKP to be an important or very important visitor destination for downtown Nanaimo. And I'll pass it on to Dave again.
Thanks, Sanal. By the way, when Sanal started this project, she was a student. When we finished, she graduated. Good job, Sanal. What about contemporary squares and plazas elsewhere? What do we know? I'll ask you to read this rather than hear my voice. So that's the source. If you're really interested in public spaces and places, Project for Public Squares or Project for Public Spaces is a really good site to go to, and they do some really good work. And I think you would agree with me. You've been out, and certainly if you travel to some of the most vibrant European cities, this is exactly what you find in their successful squares and plazas. So this was a bit of an instruction for us as we proceeded in our work. The other, thank you to the city for getting this opinion from Reed Jones, Christofferson. Basically, the key part is that it is feasible to construct a new 1- or 2-story structure over top the existing parkade. That's actually the existing area. We recommend using a light building system to minimize weight and seismic loading on the base building. Some foundational and parkade column upgrades might be required. So obviously, significant caution, but nevertheless, something we really didn't know. So it does open to safe use. The advisory committee, we worked together and put together some design principles that we always use in our processes. Promote development that recognizes and supports cultural diversity with particular recognition of the Sinamic culture. Provide for year-round programming opportunities and infrastructure. Promote connections and linkages to surrounding amenities, including Marriott Hotel, the waterfront, and Commercial Street. Create an engaging, high-quality public space unique to Nanaimo that will attract local and non-local interest. And then lastly, identify ways and means of increasing engagement with existing and planned buildings that frame the site. And these were developed after all of that previous input that we reviewed. So we went into design charrette, which, you know, I think most of you know, I love charrettes and I've been doing them for a very long time. So we had 3 teams over 2 days. There's the composition of the team. So the advisory committee plus others, as they're listed there. And what are the themes then? May I ask you to read these ones rather than me? So there were some common elements here. One of the interesting ones was connecting to the waterfront by way of a footbridge / skywalk. And those are all done independently of each other. And the teams didn't review the work of the other. The other thing is that the teams were very interactive and watched the processes because I wondered about managing the process. So some really, really good ideas. And then we needed to take those ideas and frame them out. But before we did that, we took the concepts, put them on the website, and put up posters in the downtown. This was the poster that went up with the QR connection. So feedback on the website. There were 3 preferred actions. Attractions and destinations people thought were really key, and providing amenities was key, and a seasonal strategy was a key action. Design themes that were preferred: active year-round, pop-up retail, seasonal markets, retail, restaurants, programming year-round, active night and day, circulation was seen to be important, lookout and skywalk were seen to be important, efficient arts, music programming all year round, and then Indigenous representation. So we took all of that information, and here we are back on our site. Again, look at the challenge as it spreads itself out thinly through and across the site. But based on the preceding work, we identified these 3 broad themes. Diana Krall theme, obviously, an entertainment theme in the middle, and then dining theme towards the Front Street, and then an ethnic food theme in part of it as well. So just very broadly speaking. So we really thought it was important to have a common sense plan. Lots of people have looked at the site, and it's been a real challenge to make it work, as we know. So DKP has been tested over the years. It struggled to respond because it simply lacks the bones that make public plazas viable and thriving. We need to put the bones in place. DKP plan should be aspirational, but also grounded in its reality. So let's be realistic here. It struggled in the past. We don't get this right, it's going to struggle in the future. If we get too ambitious, it could struggle in the future, I think, and that's what we think. So the plan should not be a fixed end target, but a plan that guides and offers suggestions and possibilities for future consideration as use of the site increases. So responding, so kind of encouraging, getting use, responding, encouraging some more, getting more use, responding, and building that way. A common sense preferred concept is offered here. It's a plan that builds on public input, ideas forum, website, and the charrette, and its context and unique key ideas that are found in successful squares across the globe. So key program elements, so bear with me here. So the year-round, day and night activities on the left, on the right, places to engage then. Stage, venues, lighting, seating, covered areas. Connections within and adjacent. So into and through the site, to the waterfront, to the Marriott, to Commercial Street, to Wharf Street. Engaging with existing buildings, library, CCU, and the Marriott. Supporting cultural diversity, Snuneymuxw, ethnic cultures, murals, food markets, stalls, festivals. We're going to have some fun here. Promoting green space, native plants, pergolas. Art and music, venues, permanent temporary installations, projection mapping, demographics, kids, youth, families, seniors, and public amenities, restaurants, and on one extreme, bike racks on the other. So the one thing we like to do in design is look at precedents, and so this isn't meant to replicate. We're not going to suggest replicating, but gives you a sense of the imagination and opportunity that others have used and built upon to bring thriving downtowns to life. So this is Woody sketching quickly after some of this stuff, and I think it's just simple, right? It's about recognizing that Diana Krall Plaza will only work if we do something with it, one, but connect it to beyond its own site. If it's left to be an island unto itself, it will not do what you need it to do. So that's a really key message. So the Marriott Hotel is a huge opportunity to have another connection here, huge opportunity. Connecting to the waterfront, I think it's really critical. I mean, on not just about every day, lived of course in the Beacon. It just calls out, you can't get to the downtown from the waterfront in any easy way. And then obviously connecting out and through and along Wharf Street, which is, as Sanel pointed out, is just, for her, when she was in the downtown, living near the downtown, just not a safe place for her to go. This then becomes starting to put ideas together, right? And out of all of that jumble of ideas, and we start to frame out a phasing plan. So the first phase over the next couple of years, 2022 to 2023, phase 2, 24 to 27, and plus 28. And these are suggestions. So phase 1 is right near Commercial Street. Phase 2 is in the center of Diana Krall Plaza and connecting out to, along Ghost Bastion, out to Bastion itself. And then 3 is the residual space next to Front Street, and then down along Wharf Street in the parking lot near the gallery. So phase 1, here it is here. So here's phase 1. So redefine the entry and recognize the site needs to be carefully modified to strengthen entry to the plaza, to clearly support the celebration of Diana Krall, to create a welcoming, comfortable meeting place for residents and visitors. So we see in the case of Diana Krall, an interactive site with a QR for voiceover, video, creating a little niche nook there. And I am absolutely convinced there are people who will come to Nanaimo if they knew more about Diana Krall and a place to actually celebrate her, that on the way through, I think they would stop. I really believe that. I know, when I was in Winnipeg, people talked about Diana Krall. And when I went back to be dean, I said, yeah, she's from Nanaimo, BC. No, she's not. Yeah, she is actually. Oh, I thought she was from some other big city. So I think we could play that up more. And then we're suggesting a pergola here, sorry, on the left. And that space is just dead now, dead space. So not a lot of investment. This is not a lot of investment in phase 1. Phase 2, in the center of Diana Krall Plaza, and I'm going to get into detail here because this is hard to read, but over on the structure, it's about working kind of on the edges of the plaza itself, and then the center part is a flexible entertainment space that we call it center space. And you can see the kinds of activities with the arrows where we've got in center space, people bring their chairs, and there's a potential for a small opportunity for a venue and stage for animating that huge blank wall. And then animating, there's actually, if you don't know, you can see the jazz player there on the saxophone. Actually, when you walk down Front Street, you look up the Port Theatre and there's this huge blank wall above it that having a mural on there could be, I think, and we think, really attractive. Likewise, on the blank wall that faces where the Marriott is. So let me get into some of the detail here on each site. So here's the new hotel. We're suggesting at the base of the stairs, where now there's a couple of trees and a light, that could be a really interesting animated site for craft space, a flex space. It could be a space that Sonamic actually want to connect to the hotel to tell their story, because they're got a heavy stake in the hotel. And there could be, in the conversation with them, perhaps a way to animate that space. It could also be a space for some jazz ensemble stuff. Actually, you sit on the stairs, think of Spanish stairs on a very reduced scale in Rome, and people can sit and take and watch as a minor music venue. And then we have here, there we are, a multi-use destination space where we see a kids space, maybe puppets, storytelling, crafts on display. This is an absolute void space at the moment, will continue to be, because it's just odd way this was designed, so it just sits there begging to be animated. And then we're suggesting here in the library a coffee shop and a cafe that would spill out into here. And then here's the entertainment flexible space in the middle. We call it center space, retractable stage, creative pavers that kind of would be fun for kids to go to this venue here, something they'd trip along and jump along and go over to see the puppet shows. And also it would identify this as a use space. And then cafe seating for a library. And it could be a space that the library actually generates money, right? And then retractable awnings here along Community Credit Union and along here, along the library. And then having animated space, animated wall here at night, for instance. Phase 3, here we are here. Again, overview. There's Coastal Community Credit Union, Wharf Street, a major change to Wharf Street, closing it off, making it a focus on pedestrians, but access could come in on the street here for deliveries and the like in this part, but suggesting from here on it be closed off. We're suggesting here a restaurant on that airspace, and the owners of that property, they participated in the charrette. Of course, they're always interested in knowing what's going to happen in the part of the city and its interest in the rest of the plaza, but I think I can fairly say that there was interest in this idea. And then ending up with view platform here and then connection to the waterfront across here. Now, this is the kind of, so Bill behind me saying, well, is there enough distance for this kind of thing? And when you actually look at it, it's probably going to be in here. But it's notionally, it can happen here. I've measured it off, actually. So somewhere in here, there could be a connection. Again, this is a conceptual plan, needs detailed design. The other thing that we talked about was this is where the commercial activity of Coastal Credit Union exists, and then they have their offices above. This space now, given, and who knows what happens post-pandemic, is basically unused. We had one of our design charrettes above this space in the second floor. And to the extent that, is this possible to actually change this use? Because now virtually this building, except for this end, just creates a blank interface with the plaza. This needs to be considered as potential restaurant, cafe, retail space, and change the use of this building. And it may well be that CCU says, you know what, that's a good idea because we don't need all the space we have in that building anymore. Wharf Street then, ethnic dining here, this, again, as I mentioned, closed off. Food trucks, venues here during off hours, and the parking lot's not used, and it's not used obviously after in the evenings and the weekends. And then in here, suggesting something very different. I'll get back to that in a minute. So in more detail, the restaurant space, rooftop element to it, landscaping and detailing this area here close to the Port Theatre. One of the groups really emphasized the need for landscaping, and we thought that was a great idea, so really heavy on landscaping here. Again, the crosswalk, walkway, wherever it is across here based on height requirements for buses. And then this idea here for outdoor dining, that kind of precedent that exists elsewhere, we think could be transferred here quite nicely. And then here's the CCU suggested reuse for some of this space. And at the worst case situation, even if a cafe was put here, but ideally it'd be great to have much more interaction here. And then lastly, focusing on Orr Street itself, we're suggesting actually a fountain structure here that can carry the weight of vehicles. Those exist in all kinds of cities now. So it's a fountain when this area is closed off. Great place for kids to play. It's a tremendous visual element down Orr Street to see that fountain, both from the waterfront and from Front Drive and from commercial as well. And then food truck venues we mentioned with sitting area here, and then the kiosks and ethnic dining along here. I should say that, and I went over it in the phase 2, we suggest as in phase 1, making sure there's access for the food trucks to continue to use Diana Krall Plaza. Phase 2, they actually we're suggesting they go to the airspace site, and then phase 3 they end up with this kind of more permanent site use until, and I think we all know this site's going to be redeveloped. It's just too primary a site not to be. So we're trying to not commit spaces that have potential for long-term conversion. So this one would be something like a food truck use site. So the development strategy, it's consistent with the Sheridan Group input. DKP should be programmed to carefully build use and associated investments. No big expensive moves or surprises at the start. As and if use builds and investments are warranted, then there could be increased expenditure over a 5 or 6 year time frame. So development ideas by phase, we're just wrapping up. Lighting, bike racks, seating, landscaping, that should be consistent across all 3. Phase 1, we're suggesting the pergola, covered seating be built. There are people who need to have a place to sit and eat in the summer and something covered. Landscaping, bike racks, retain the food truck entry I'd mentioned. Diana Krall installation with the QR dedicated space. Continue to activate the remaining space through programming and a night market. Consider temporary portable ice rink. Now I put that in only because I used to play hockey, played old timers too, and now I don't, but I remember when the one went down in the park, it was kind of, so I threw it, I just couldn't help. That's me, so I just thought, well, that might be cool initially, just initially. Development ideas by phase 2 to 2024 to 27. So creative paver installations and landscaping, so changing up some of the pavers. They don't have to be changed, but getting some of the interesting patterns. Library, coffee shop, cafe, kiosks along the library, and so people can then purchase food and sit under umbrellas. CCU awnings to be used for covered activities as well. Retractable stage, entertainment flex space development, projection mapping and murals, museum way stage, crafts space, flex space, so that's right opposite the Marriott Hotel. Because we really think that when that hotel builds out and they've got that eating area opposite this, that there's just, people are going to want to cross over, and that's one way to connect. Connect to Coast Bastion, and then food trucks clustered near the airspace parcels I mentioned. And then phase 3, the build-out ideas beyond 2028. Restaurant and terrace dining on the airspace parcel, elevated walkway to the waterfront, Orr Street ethnic dining kiosks with seating, dedicated food truck area and art connection to Bastion Street, water fountain feature embedded in Orr Street, and a partial CCU first floor redevelopment into retail and restaurant. Suggested next steps then, agree to implement phase 1, explore with Synamic their interest in phase 2 and 3 development, including a link between the Marriott Hotel and Museum Way, Stagecraft, Flex Space, and programming for center space as well. Work with Greater Nanaimo Chamber of Commerce and DNBIA to program Thursday night market, continue to do that. Create day and night music programming for summer and fall of 2022. Animate the Port Theatre West Wall, and then explore increased food truck vendor options for all days during summer. So this is really kind of trying to start to get use building slowly without all kinds of commitment to expenditures, but start to get people into that space. And the more we get them into it, the more they're going to feel ownership, the more people are going to want to come down, and then you start building strategically. Thanks for the opportunity. This is one of my favorites, Piazza Navona in Rome. I mean, Bernini figured this out, how many years ago now? 600 years ago.
Thank you to both of you for being here. Council, any questions for Dr. Whitty? Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Whitty, and thanks, Anel. I really appreciate this. This has to be, and I'm demonstrating my usual profound grasp of the obvious, one of the deadest, dullest spaces in the city of Nanaimo that probably has the most potential, but I appreciate very much its challenges. I've often tried to think of something bright there myself, and so I want to pay my compliments to the ideas that have been put forward today. I don't think we can continue to support our downtown unless we do take steps with that particular area. It certainly points to further changes on Commercial Street as well, I think, which are going to be necessary. In terms of you talk animating the west wall, what were you thinking exactly, or did you have a specific?
Well, you could, ideas in the past have been floated that it becomes a giant fixed mural with a QR, and it tells a story. It could tell the story of the Tsunamic, for instance. That's been floated in the past over a beer with a friend. So there's that idea. There's if you went to there's the artist that was shown in Vancouver.
Van Gogh?
Thank you. Van Gogh. You could use that technique as well on that wall at night. Yeah. So it's not saying it should be that. We should think about a range of that's and then figure out what's best with some expertise that knows best about that. But clearly that wall now just cries out for some kind of opportunity.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, thank you, Dr. Whitty. I certainly respect your expertise and experience, and I thank you for the ideas that you and your team have come up with. When I look through your presentation report, I guess the one thing that I wanted to ask you about was when you developed the charrettes, you mentioned participation from the credit union, the library, and the art gallery. And I'm really wondering, where does the Port Theatre fit into this? Because Diana Krall, of course, closely associated out of all of those entities with the Port Theatre. And I didn't see much in the report about any opportunity to connect the plaza to the theatre. And I don't know if that's possible, but are there any opportunities that you identified to do that? Is it something that you discussed at all? We know that the Port Theatre for years has hoped to expand with a practice stage. Would that, if it ever came about, impact this area? Could you just comment on that?
Sure, good question. As we understand it, the Port Theatre has scaled back what they're going to do, and that footprint fits very nicely into it doesn't take up any area that we're talking about here. It fits very nicely. To your question about connecting through, the plaza is used for fire escape only. It's not an access point, and it's not a control point for access at all. And it's not meant to be, and won't be in the future. The control needs to be off of Museum Way and Front Street. Those are the entries, and that's the controlled entry.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else, Council? Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to Dr. Whitty. Thank you very much for the presentation. When I was reviewing the report, I looked at Google Maps and I look at the landscape that exists on the plaza that is next to Commercial Street. And to me, it looks like it's creating an artificial wall to stop people from going down the plaza. And I know one of your presentations suggests editing some of that. Like I was thinking of maybe taking the entire thing out, including the tuner, and putting it somewhere else. Also, the arches that are in the opposite those windows of the credit union that you say are not being used from like we're taking those out. The idea with those would be go as well. Is that part of the design?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
Okay.
yeah, I think we didn't get into that specific detail, but if the site's going to, we did talk about opening up on commercial. It does need to be opened up. Yes to the tuning fork. Jazz musicians don't use tuning forks. One. And two, to the Coastal Community Credit Union thing. Anyway, no disrespect, but it was there put in with an idea that it would accomplish something. We would suggest it probably should be replaced. It's not as critical as opening up onto commercial. Of the two,
Right.
that's the most critical.
And I could see opening up commercial being relatively something we could pretty well do right away, almost.
Right.
My other thought is,
may I say though,
sure.
Councilor Bonner, that if that happens, there has to be then investment in that we would suggest and feel Diana Krall, QR, investing in that and the pergola. Because in the absence of that, we haven't achieved anything. We need to create some mass activity there of interest that people want to partake in, and then eventually move into the site more deeply.
Because I also see as part of this your presentation, there's three basic walls that are blank. There's the entire Port Theatre, which screams out mural.
Yeah.
There's also I guess it would be the south-facing wall on the Coast Community, the Bastion, Bastion property. That could easily do a mural up as well. And probably the east-facing wall on the library.
Right.
All of those could easily encompass a mural, which could be done relatively soon, sooner than later. And that would certainly help out. In terms of the animation of the Port Theatre, they used to have a TV there at that one time when it was first built, I believe. And that came out because it became problematic and it wasn't working. But I would certainly be interested in putting that back in. Maybe they don't want to manage it, but at least finding some way to manage what's presented on it.
I remember when I first came in 2010. That screen had the hockey games on it, and the place was packed. I went there. I'm a little hesitant about a TV because then that may mean that's all it's done. I just, I think we're wise to maybe pause and just think about that and that next phase two, stage two, or phase two. And I neglected to mention that in phase two, we talk about animating that Coast Bastion blank wall.
Anything else, Council? Nope.
I have a question.
Okay, we'll go to Councillor Armstrong and then Councillor Hammonds.
Thank you. Sorry, I came into the middle of your presentation, but one thing that we're hearing constantly from a lot of people is the fact that there's no safe places for bike storage. Could any part of that Diana Krall space be used for that? Because one of the issues that you hear from women and younger people is they're scared to go in the undergrounds.
Yeah. So we do talk about bike racks throughout the site. We just haven't said this is where they should go. The next stage of this is for phase one, you need some detailed design, obviously construct, but all of the phases need detailed design. This is a preferred conceptual plan. So yeah, we talk about bike racks throughout the site. They need to be. It's just a matter of where they get placed in relation to other final decisions.
Thank you. I'm very, very thankful for the work you've done on this, and everything looks really interesting, and I look forward to further discussion and moving it forward.
Councillor Hemmings.
Thank you, Chair. And I'll add my name to the list of those with gratitude for your work in this. Could I get you to go back a few slides to Phase 1 investments, please? If you can. I think it's about 5 slides back.
Yep.
Oh, I think we might have actually missed it.
Phase 2 or Phase 1? There's Phase 1.
Okay. It was a different slide, but a number of the things that you listed are things that we're actually working on, and I'm wondering if I can have staff comment on some of the pieces where the touch points are between your design work and what's already happening, and then further to staff, what remains and how will that come before us as a decision? Sorry, Dr. Whitty, that wasn't for you.
No, I understand. Thanks.
Chair, through you to Councillor Hemmings, possibly after Mr. Whitty is done with questions and we hear from the delegation, that might work best with the recommendation that staff have forward and that question, and they could comment then. That would work.
Thank you, Ms. Gary. Council, anything else for Dr. Whitty? Seeing none, thank you very much, Dr. Whitty. Always a pleasure.
Okay, thank you. And I do want to thank Bill for his assistance through this COVID time too. So yeah, and thanks for having belief and taking a look at this one. Thanks.
We do have one delegation to this item, Mr. Dan Appel. Welcome again, and you have 5 minutes.
Okay, I apologize. I will take a little longer this time. And I do want to express my admiration for Dr. Whitty and all the work that his group have done on this particularly very, very difficult project. There's no doubt about that. Now, my experience with Diana Krall Plaza began within the year that I had arrived in Nanaimo. And everybody was invited to an open house that was to present the project to the general public at the time. So I went to that just out of curiosity. And I was admiring the model. In those days, there were wooden models that were made of this. And just thinking how much craftsmanship went into the model itself. While I was doing that, somebody who was a promoter of this particular project came up to me and started talking, and he was a member of the Chamber of Commerce. I don't remember his name. He was a member of I do remember he was a member of the Chamber of Commerce, and he was a member of the Rotary North Society, and he was the manager of Country Club Mall at the time. And he was very enthusiastic. He was a big smile. He said, this is going to bring life to our downtown. This is going to encourage business in the area and inspire a lot of redevelopment in the area itself. He was very happy. And then after he introduced himself and made these statements, he said, well, what do you think of this? And I said, well, and I remember this well because this is the first time I'd made a prediction of how something would turn out based on models that I'd developed over the previous 10 years by observing human behavior in public spaces such as this. So I said to him, well, this space will be empty for 10 years, and then somebody will come along and try to remodel it to reanimate it, and that will fail too. And you could just see the smile drop out of his face, and he responded by saying, well, I think I'll go talk to those people over there. And I understand. No, here I am being Danny Downer. But it essentially was my view that kind of prevailed on this. And I honestly don't know who was involved in the planning of that at the time, but I sure wish it was Dr. Whitty, for sure. we would be having probably no discussion about Diana Krall Plaza today, if that were the case. And his students, this is a fairly good approach to that space. But I have a different approach. I would have a different approach. And essentially it could be framed as if a space is empty, it's not needed. And certainly the lessons we can learn from Diana Krall Plaza is that open public space along a retail street does no favors to the retail environment that it's in. And even this plan will has a serious problem in that if it does actually succeed in animating this area, it will actually draw from the animation that occurs on Commercial Street. And you are in a problem of setting up competition for businesses that are already struggling on Commercial Street. And a large part of the reason they're struggling is because of this space, because empty space does not attract people. So really the thing that has to be done is to face that square with retail, add market in the form of residential, and that would probably be the best thing. Now, I know that won't be done because that represents major costs, major political capital as well. I know that won't happen, but I want to point this out, that just how hard it is to fix a space like this. It has had planning errors incorporated into its construction. It's very expensive, very difficult to fix. And I think this presentation kind of proves my point.
Thank you, Mr. Appel. Council, any questions for Mr. Appel? Councillor Hemmens.
Thank you, Chair. I just
want to make sure that I heard you correctly, Mr. Appel. Did you say that if we do...
Is it on? I'm on.
You're on. Yeah.
Thank you. If we do Diana Krall redevelopment well, that we'll be taking away from Commercial Street traffic?
Very likely, yes. That's basic. You're not adding to the market that's already there. You're just taking away from the market.
You don't think it will draw new people in and bring new...
Well, you will draw people. You might well draw people into that space, but you're taking them away from Commercial Street. You're not taking them away from the the waterfront. They're not going to be connected to that. You're not adding market to that. And I think the best way to add market is residential, to be honest with you.
Thank you.
Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Pell. I just want to make sure I understand what you're suggesting. And what you just said now threw me a little. Are you suggesting that we build up from that space and turn it into residential?
You should have a line of commercial, a complete line of commercial in that area, in the front of that area, and then behind that and above that, 2 or 3 layers of residential would work very well.
And you may not have been conscious of it today, but Dr. Whitty presented the engineer's letter, referred to the engineer's letter that would indicate that would probably require a great deal of...
Well, no, he just said the opposite of that. He said that light construction could be easily tolerated there.
Sorry, light structures, though. When you're talking 3 stories, I'm thinking... I think, yes, he's going to remind me of 2 stories was probably...
Yeah, which is, I'm not thinking anything more than that either. You could also reinforce what's underneath the parkade itself and build that up too, if you thought that was going to work. But I'm not saying this to discourage you from trying that or do something else. I don't expect you. This is a radical idea. It's expensive and it costs a lot. I just want you to keep in mind, especially when we get to the hub proposal, how expensive, how difficult it is to fix this sort of thing.
And if I may, what I also heard you say, I think, is you would literally line the area and I suppose in practical terms shrink the existing plaza with commercial
Yeah,
space all around.
I could imagine you could, the place where the tuning fork is, you could surround that with building properly. That wouldn't be too bad because it's not that far from Commercial Street and it does add to the Commercial Street. But essentially the plaza, the reason it's empty is because it's not needed. So it's something to consider. I know that's a kind of strange way to conceive of things, but sometimes looking at it from a different perspective really helps.
Thank you, Mr. Appel. I don't see any other speakers, so thank you. Which brings us to item 3, Downtown Hub Project Update.
Sorry.
Sorry, item 2, Commercial Street Revitalization Study Update.
Sorry, Chair, there is just a recommendation dealing with item number 1 that perhaps
Right.
staff.
So we do have a recommended motion. Yeah. Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by Mayor Crowe. Seconder.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch your sentence there.
Oh, there is a recommendation.
Yes, I'd
Okay,
either move it or
seconded by
second it.
Councilor Hemmings.
Thank you.
Any discussion on this? Councilor
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Armstrong.
Yeah, just on that, when I'm looking at that, consider the material as part of the discussions, will that include presenting that plan to the public as a whole so they can look at the concepts?
Mr. Corson?
Yeah, sorry, thank you, Chair. Yeah, so through the Commercial Street project, this information will be shared with everyone and incorporated into the overall plan for downtown. So yes, it will be.
Thank you.
And Councilor Hemmings, is this just a leftover? Sorry, still figuring this thing out. Any other discussion, Council? Call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? See none opposed. Motion carries. Okay, item 2 here. Commercial Street Revitalization Study Update. Mr. Lindsay?
Thank you. Through the chair, I'm just going to turn it over immediately to Mr. Corson to take us through the next item, which I think ties in very well to the information you just received.
Yeah, so thank you, Chair. And it's a great question by Councilor Armstrong. So again, the purpose of this study is really to tie in all the great work that's going on downtown and help you have a game plan for implementation and to help prioritize where you want to invest in the coming years. Again, as we mentioned before, downtown is certainly a priority, and I know over the last 10 years we've talked about Commercial Street, and we've got lots of different plans for Commercial Street. We've done lots of studies, but there's nothing specific on how to actually implement Commercial Street. So that's kind of really the focus of this study is taking all the good work we've done, getting more feedback from the public, and then going forward. This study for Commercial Street came out of discussion with Council in July, and following that, staff issued an RFP, and we were successful in securing a team led by Tool Consulting with assistance from Mobicon. So 2 really interesting firms that do work all over North America who have experience in this, and they're going to bring their expertise here and work closely with the community and Council. So the overall, this project again is about tying everything together, having a clear game plan, and focusing on the public realm. And through this, we're going to develop a set of design guidelines and help influence your future capital plans. So I think for me, the big goal from this would be when this project's completed next spring, that your future budget discussions for 2023, 2024, and 2025 are able to incorporate elements of this work into it. We also have a few projects, which I'll show you in a few minutes, which are on hold at the moment until we actually have this plan put in place for you. So the study area for the Commercial Street plan is really incorporates the hub project area from Wallace Street on Albert all the way up to Front Street by Dallas Square. And then we're branching off, like Dr. Whitty mentioned, down Wharf Street, Diana Krall Plaza, Skinner Street, and a little bit of Chapel Street. So really kind of the heart of your downtown. and finding ways to refresh this area, kind of rethink potentially the traffic, pedestrian interactions in this area, and really help downtown become the gem that it is. So in terms of the projects again, so we've got the hub project underway right now. Mr. Sims is going to talk to you about the Terminal Avenue upgrades. Dr. Woody just talked to you about Diana Krall. So those are kind of the planning studies underway. Of course, Reimagine overarches all of this. And we'll talk about that again just in a minute about the kind of some of the initial feedback for downtown we're getting through Reimagine Nanaimo. And then right now we actually have 2 projects that we were going to do this year, and we put them on hold because a study like this will give us some great guidance on how we should advance. So the commercial Bastion intersection right now is on hold. We've taken that from being an active traffic signal to just being a 4-way stop. It's supposed to be rebuilt, but as our engineering staff, we're about to proceed with that project. The question was, what materials do we use? How does the road look? What is the scope of that area? So this will help us get direction on that. And then with the street trees, we had a lot of street trees that you'll remember, were heaving up the sidewalks and causing trip hazards. And the question was, well, should we replace these trees? And if we do, what type of trees and where do they go? And as a result of this plan, the streetscape could be quite different. Trees might be in different locations than they are now. So certainly don't want to replace those until we have a game plan. And then in terms of one of the key things for us on this project is making sure that we integrate all the work that's been going on, and we certainly collaborate with our partners downtown and in the wider community. So the consultant team have prepared a good program, and this might be a little bit hard to read the first part, but this is kind of the key elements in their work plan. Is they're starting with a day of learning, they're calling it, which is really for them to get up to speed on all our policies and documents, and meeting with staff and understanding what's going on, looking at the assessment work that's taken place. They've already been in town and done a preliminary screening. They're going to take all of Dr. Whitty's good work, the preliminary work from the hub as well. We're going to update the Get Involved website, which I think you know is our main platform now for getting out to the community, where we run Reimagine Nanaimo off that, the Waterfront Walkway, the hub, etc. So we'll get that page up and running really soon. In November, later November, we're going to have a Discovery Charrette, and that's a 3-day event where the consultant team is going to host a series of events for the public, stakeholders, council, etc., to start discussing the project area and getting some feedback. We're hopeful to have a workshop with council one-on-one through a GPC where we just talk about Commercial Street and talk about some of the preliminary ideas. I think this will feed in well with what you just heard from Dr. Whitty's work, as well as any discussions we have today on the hub. It'll help draw things together for you. And then early next year in February, the goal is to have what I would call more of a typical charrette, where we'll get into the design work of getting towards a final vision for this area. Again, just a ton of, this is kind of like Diana Krall. There's been lots of work done downtown. We have all our planning documents that guide us, whether it's the existing OCP, soon we'll have the new city plan, the downtown design guidelines and zoning bylaw, the mobility study that was recently completed. Just wanted to kind of, in your PowerPoint, I've just pulled in some of the downtown feedback we've been getting through Reimagine, and now certainly all that work will be provided to the consultant team, so they have that. And I'll let you look at those in your own time. Again, there's all the documents that help provide that framework. And then in terms of schedule, the consultant team is already working, and our goal again is to have these larger events with public and council in November, December, probably January, February, and then rolling towards the final plan for you before the summer of next year. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Council, any questions for Mr. Corson?
Thank you, Chair. Perhaps Councillor Hemmons would like to ask that question that she had previously about how, I think how it was ties in, the Diana Crawl ties in with the other work that you're doing currently right now.
I think it was answered in the motion moved by Mayor Krogh. However, I will just speak briefly and say that the best GPC I think we've had is the one that we walked downtown and we looked at all the gaps and we looked at the pinch points, et cetera, et cetera. So if I'd just put in a plug that we do that again. We actually go out into the community to talk about it.
Council, any other questions? Your Worship?
I do.
Your Worship, and then we'll go to Councillor Armstrong.
Councillor Armstrong first.
Oh, thank you. My question is when you come forward with some of these projects, will there be a budget attached so that we know what we're looking at cost-wise?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Armstrong, yeah, that's the idea, is to actually have it costed out so that you can make some informed decisions about how you want to phase it. We'll work, of course, from an integrated perspective, we'll work with our park staff, with our engineering staff, to develop the budgets for you, and then you'll be able to decide how you want to proceed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Corson, for the presentation. This may be a somewhat unfair question, maybe best asked of Ms. Constal earlier, but is some of the feedback that's come back through our general process, Reimagine AMRO process, has it indicated any direction or trend or desire to turn Commercial Street, certainly one section of it, into a one-way street, perhaps line it with those trees which people quite rightly miss and didn't want to see taken down for obvious reasons but had to?
Yeah, through the chair to Mayor Krogh. Yeah, certainly we've got feedback both ways from the public, and I think through this process, our transportation department will be doing analysis to help inform that decision making, because we certainly hear members of the public saying, let's see Commercial Street fully pedestrianized. We hear people say, let's do it one way. We hear people say, leave it as it is. So Mr. Rose and his team are going to be doing the analysis piece to see how it works from a network perspective. And then really after that, we'll leave it up to the engagement we do to see where people want to go with that. And then of course, ultimately your decision on what you think works best for this street. So yeah, Commercial Street could look quite different as a result of this process.
Councillor Turley.
This question is probably more fairly directed at Mr. Sims, but if you were considering one-way Commercial Street as part of the plan, would it be what I think of as one way up from Terminal or one way down towards Terminal? And do we have any traffic counts that would indicate, are more people coming down Commercial, turning right on Terminal and heading home, or are more people coming into off Terminal and turning right up onto Commercial and headed up?
Mr. Chair, I wouldn't want to steal Mr. Rose's thunder on this, but I don't believe there's any preset ideas at this point. And I think this project will help inform it. Speaking purely through my hat and intuitively, it seems like pulling people in off Terminal and up Commercial is probably the desire line, but that's still to be hashed out as part of this project. Thank you.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Mr. Corson. This is probably a very unusual question for me to ask, but I do own a bicycle and I do occasionally ride it. So my question is more to do with, we're talking bike lanes, but we don't often hear about how we're going to provide security for parking those bikes. I guess it's the best way of putting it. And is there any ideas in the plan to actually incorporate secure parking of bikes? I'm thinking particularly the ones I saw that made a lot of sense to me were down by the BC Cancer Centre next to Royal Jubilee in Victoria, where they're actually encased in a container. So anyway, I just throw that question out there. Thank you.
Yeah, so through the chair to Councillor Turley. Yeah, great question. And certainly we're on day one of this project. There's lots of ideas, but we haven't gone out and asked for more ideas. I think one of the comments we've certainly been getting back from council and the public is a need for secure bike parking in the downtown. And think we were talking about that with Diana Krall, where would they go? So I think we need to find a location that works best in downtown, probably multiple locations, and then finding something that is secure and people have confidence in, because you've invested a lot of money in the bike lanes. You've got Front Street done now. Albert Street's going to get built next year. You're going to be connecting in the rest of the network, and you're going to be attracting a lot more people into the downtown core on bikes. So the end of destination is pretty important. So yeah, great question.
Thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Chair. This question sort of came up to me in Dr. Woody's presentation. We're looking at the possibility of adding some commercial space, kiosks, could be coffee shops on the Diana Krall Plaza, and which would then spill out into this area here. When the report comes back to us in terms of costing, I would like to see, in the event that staff doesn't believe it may be commercially viable, or we may not get a coffee person wanting to set up shop, that we actually pay to have that services done. I don't see this thing being successful unless we're filling it all up. And I would certainly look at the possibility of not necessarily relying on the good graces of the free enterprise system to make sure that we get enough folks in there that I'd be looking at costing to see what it would cost us to set up a shop if that was where we were heading to.
Not sure that was a question, Councillor Bonner, but staff.
Just a request.
Staff got your request. Seeing no one else on the speakers list, we will go to the delegation here shortly, but I just want to say I was very nervous about this project, and I was super excited by some of the design firms that put in for the RFP and the one that was selected. So I'm feeling very, very good about this. So I'm excited to see it come together. On this item, we have Mr. Appel. Again, you have 5 minutes.
Okay, on this project, I was expecting it to be a little further down the line, and we would be getting a little better indication of what was planned here. But I think I can kind of state this with some considerable confidence that this building here, this conference center, represents a number of issues and liabilities associated with business on Commercial Street. And really to solve or address those issues would require a fairly expensive and a fairly extensive remodel of this building. Now I know this planning will never anywhere near come close to that kind of an objective. But it is one of the more essential parts of making Commercial Street a success. I think this plan, I look forward to it in a sense that it will create some changes, but because it's not adding to the value of the retail stock or the real estate or to the market that we're doing, and believe me, I really wish this would be a serious discussion of increasing the market for the businesses on Commercial Street. I really wish this was not so much form as a matter of strategy. I could fairly safely predict that you'll put together a plan and it won't have too much positive impact on the businesses that are already here. And I certainly hope that that those improvements are not costed to those merchants who are already struggling in large part because of Diana Krall Plaza and this building itself, city initiatives. So that's about all I want to say about this. Again, I have to emphasize that this is the result of previous planning mistakes. We're facing some troubles based on previous planning mistakes. And those are extremely hard to fix and very expensive. And I want you to keep that in mind when we start the discussion about the Hub City project.
Thank you, Mr. Appel. Councillor Turley? Oh, okay. Council, any questions for Mr. Appel? Your Worship.
I might offer some comment, and it's based on memory. When I came to town to Article in 1979, before the Nanaimo became the planner's nightmare, being mauled to death all over the place, and then we started to spend our first huge chunk of change on downtown revitalization, I might say Commercial Street was where it was at. Everything was available. When our children were young, Saturday mornings was a standard routine. Thor and Jerry Howell's bookstore and donuts and coffee, well, not for the children, of course, afterwards at the Scotch Bakery. You needed hardware, it was there. Fletcher's Furniture was prospering, Fletcher's Music, all of those things. And it was a happening and busy place. And so we have been trying to struggle back as a city, collectively through government and individually through remarkable businesses. And I see we're going to hear from Ms. Sampson back there, who I think I pay my compliments to, is the model of someone who's made a success in downtown, although I'm sure she's facing her challenges. But there are opportunities here, and I had occasion to drive through town somewhat later in the evening than is normally the case when it was dark the other night, and I noticed that there wasn't a parking space anywhere on Commercial or Front, and there, so as much as Mr. Pell, I appreciate your concerns about this. I think things are happening, and our job is to not get in the way of them, but also to enhance them. And I think as the city moves forward with this plan, and having heard your words and Dr. Whitty and others, we have an opportunity here. And I'm very positive about the future of this downtown. If the provincial government starts to move as it appropriately should, to deal with the incredible number of people who are homeless for a whole variety of reasons, that this downtown has tremendous potential. It is one of the most historic and attractive downtowns in British Columbia. I would argue not even necessarily second to Fernie or Victoria or Gastown in Vancouver. And we should think of this as a positive step. And the good news is, if you think we're not far enough along, then there's more opportunity for everyone to get their oar into the water and assist council and staff who I know are devoted to trying to make this city all that it can be. So forgive the lecture. It's a mayor's privilege to yak on. Chair, you've been indulgent as always. Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Appel, for your comments today.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. There's a lot of potential here for sure.
I was going to highlight, your worship. I didn't sense a question there, but as you get less opportunity to go on than the rest of us, I thought I'd give you a bit of runway. Only this once, though. Thank you, Mr. Appel. And I would just note as a point of information for you that council did pass a motion to receive a report from staff about looking at some flexible options for the conference center. Moving on, unless anyone else has any other items on this, council. Ms. Scurry.
Thank you, Chair. Noting the time, there is a scheduled recess at 3 p.m., but I was wondering if council wishes to go ahead with the recess, if now would be a better time before getting into the last topic that's on the
Good suggestion. Any objections? Okay, we will recess for 10 minutes.
Yes.
All right. See you all back at 3.
Hi, Leonard Krogh here. I'm here with Karen Lindsay today. She's going to show me how to sign up for our app.
Voyant Alert, the City of Nanaimo's emergency notification system. So we'll start by going into the App Store, Mayor Krogh.
Done.
Next, you're going to hit search. And you're going to search for the app, which is Voyant Alert. So it's VOYENT. Now you see, it's already selected it. Click there, hit get, and then we're going to install.
And why are we downloading this app?
We're downloading that so that you can get this onto your phone system, and what it will do is it will send you a push notification out. So if the City of Nanaimo issues an emergency alert, it will actually push the notification out onto your phone. The really nice part of this app is that it's anonymous, so it goes by postal code. So we're not requesting you to put your name or personal information in, it just works off of the app through your phone system. There are also, if you have family members or friends that maybe don't have a smartphone or would like another way, you can also sign up online or call our Public Works Department, and they have phone and texting options available as well. So there's lots of options for people depending on what their needs are.
Fabulous. So you can rest with some comfort knowing you can find out what's necessary and know that people who are important to you are notified.
Absolutely. So now you have Voyant Alert on your phone. And now just select open. So the next thing you're going to do is you're going to tap in the postal code that it's prompting you.
All right. So
you just click on there and start entering. And then find on a map. So here you'll see the welcome page for the City of Nanaimo, and you want to subscribe to notifications, yes?
Yes.
Click that you agree to the terms, so click both to the yes for consent, and then hit next. And it's going to ask to either allow or not allow notifications, and you want to always allow.
Always allow.
Always allow, and the reason that is if you don't allow, it won't push the notification out to you. So always allow.
Always allow.
And now you see here, you've got a message to accept that you've signed out. That's the two-factor authentication, and you're going to tap yes. And now you're in the system. Also, when you have a moment, we recommend that you pick your locations and sign up based on those locations, and then you'll get alerts from the City of Nanaimo.
Karen, thank you. Everyone, sign up.
Hey, Tiana. Hey. This sure is the coldest rink in town.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, buddy!
Nice save, James!
Wow, your goalie is keeping you guys in the game. Cheers.
Oh, man, that's hot.
Sorry, that's the way I like it. Oh.
Go, 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 go!
Penalty shot!
Scalds from hot drinks are a leading cause of hospitalization for children under 5.
2 minutes, down in the front, unsportsmanlike conduct.
Hot tea and coffee will cause serious burns to a child in less than a second.
Got it, kid? Use the lid.
What we have here is the Real Ice technology that was installed at the Nanaimo Ice Center. It allows us to use cold water from traditionally hot water that we used to use for making ice. Basically, the water will come in through the bottom, go in through a vortex idea, making the air bubbles microscopic in size, which makes a better, more dense sheet of ice.
Differences that you'll see with the Real Ice is there's less snow developed, so that's easier for cleaning, and also it's a denser, harder, clear ice. So the ice skaters will certainly enjoy that. And the city plans to implement Real Ice at our other 2 arenas as well. Some of the other efficiencies we've implemented in this facility are LED lights in some areas, and we've also, in the last few years, installed a higher efficiency refrigeration system, which lowers our energy costs. Both Zambonis at our facility are now electrically operated, so there's no harmful emissions, and they're very quiet as well. So what this means for the city is that we're able to use less energy and also reduce the amount of greenhouse gas emissions, which is more beneficial to the environment.
We're here at Bruce and Dundas. Somebody's stolen the street names that were here, so we're here to replace them. Our sign shop has just generated us 2 signs, so I'm going to go through the process of putting it together and reinstalling the street names. First thing, we got to center the signs. We do everything on this truck. We've got all the equipment on here to build, install, remove, repair, whether it's street signs, street names, posts, banners, Christmas decorations, and so forth. I'm going to basically just put the sign in the brackets, and we'll be doing both signs, of course. So I've got a cross bracket that I'm going to put in, and then add the top sign, which is this street we're on, Dundas. Sorry, do the same there. We put the street that we're coming up to on the bottom, so they all basically have the same. The cross street will be on the top. We got to put some bolts in to secure them so nobody will steal the street name. We're ready to go. Just put this back and we'll go out and install this where the missing one is. Every year we do what we call a stop sign survey, where we go around and check all the stops. We clean them, make sure they're in the right spots, in good condition, not bent, and we also clean the street names, make sure they're good. As we're doing that, if there's ones that we decide we want to replace, we do that at that time. This year we're looking at approximately about 120 sets. It's very expensive to do, but we're continually, weekly changing street names because of either them getting damaged or people breaking them and taking them. So I'll put this on, and then I put a bolt through to secure it to the post. There we go. And that's good, we're done. Dundas and Bruce Ave are now ready to go.
reflection on some direction, we'd love to hear it. Another point is really just to put some factual information out there in the public realm. I think that's important, given some of the perhaps misconceptions that are out there. Excuse me. As Mr. Corson's noted, this is really a cornerstone of your strategic plan. It's a cornerstone of many studies over many years, and Council's made this very, very clear that the downtown is a high priority. This one is quite an interesting potential for a project. I think of the context of the downtown and seeing the evolution, even some of the previous discussions where the mayor had alluded to. This is a vibrant and growing locale. The downtown is exciting. Think about the residential development that has occurred and is due to occur. We have a hotel, we've got a very vibrant theater. We're a little bit maybe foggy vision because of the pandemic and maybe a bit thrown off by that, but remember, this is quite an exciting downtown. In the GPC that Mr. Corson referenced, talked about back in July of 2019, one of the council's very clear directions was on the redevelopment of its key sites, and this is one of them. Together with the opportunity of permanently siting a transit exchange, and this is sort of ties the whole thing together. We'll just talk a little bit more about all of the various projects. And, you know, to you and to staff and to the community, this is really an obvious next step in terms of the evolution of downtown. A lot of the impetus for this came from our downtown mobility hub study, and as mentioned from Reimagine Nanaimo. So there's a number of goals for the project that you can see here, and it's really about improving vibrancy, creating a gateway, creating a central core for an accessible core for transit users, and just providing a link between all the transportation networks such as cycling and pedestrian amenities. Excuse me. And I think I've said it before, but personally just wanted to congratulate council for taking this sort of bold action of the property acquisition and really taking command of this corner. And it's the kind of thing that's needed. It's the kind of vision that's needed. We also want to ensure that we've got, you know, a very careful design. We don't want to get this wrong. So that's why we're intending to be here in front of you often, engaging with the community as well. So this is kind of the project area, and as Mr. Corson noted, it ties in, and it's really coherent, and I really need to emphasize this, it's coherent with the master planning for commercial. We want to make sure that this commercial terminal all ties together in a coherent manner. So for this particular project area, we've got a multidisciplinary team consisting of urban designers, planners, landscape architects, transit expertise, and transportation engineers. So there's a lot of things going on. The various points of interest on the map you see, we've got Commercial Street, Commercial Terminal, we've got the what's formerly known as the Gene Burns Building, that's the opportunity for redevelopment of that site. We've got, of course, the Victoria Crescent Albert Wallace commercial intersection, which is an infamous space. We've got the park, sometimes known as Tideline, at Albert and Victoria. Of course, we've got the famous China Steps and Lois Lane. The potential for the transit exchange along Terminal Avenue from the edge of the Gene Burns site all the way to the A&W essentially. And then the entry into Port Place Mall to soften that, pedestrianize it, to make it a little more friendly, incorporating improvements to the Italian Fountain. And at the very south end of the project, the Pocket Park, or the Pioneer Park there. So a number of elements to it. One of them is Terminal Avenue. This was in council's capital plan to undertake. So the initial phase would be this particular section between Esplanade and Commercial, with future phases taking us all the way up to Comox and across to the Pearson Bridge. So as you may recall, this really grew out of the Terminal Nickel Reimagined, which was a community-driven exercise. In a nutshell, we really want to create not a highway feel. We want to create a pedestrianized, commercial, very commercial, very vibrant feel to this. We're taking advantage of the opportunity to renew utilities, but to refresh the entire area. So this is one of the core projects to this whole area. And I really want to express my thanks to the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, who are coming forward with almost $1 million in funding next year to resurface this stretch of road. So a couple of years ago, when we were doing the engagement with the public on the downtown mobility, in trying to create an accessible central transit location, we really focused on the amenities, and that was what we heard largely from the public, was it's important to have a bright, clearly marked pedestrian facilities, good lighting, some greenery, some softened edges, and it was about creating a very welcome and vibrant space. So the graphic you see before you is just really a concept of how that could work. Well, a bit of a misconception is that the city bought the Gene Burns building to park buses on it. And I just really want to emphasize that that's not the case. We needed part of the Gene Burns site to ensure that the transit exchange could function, but it's really along that entire length. And you'll see a property slide later that shows that. So these graphics were presented to the public, and it's really about trying to foster some public input. I'll talk a little bit more about what we've got so far, but there's some basic concepts, some sort of a park or a plaza, or potentially redeveloping the remaining Gene Burns site into a building of some sort. I would say that when we first started the project, there was a sense, because of the environmental remediation needed, because of the filling and so on and so forth, and the uncertain soil underneath, that the easy route was some sort of a public plaza. But I think what we're hearing clearly from the community, clearly from our urban designer, and is really asking the question, how much public space do we need in the downtown core? And so that's perhaps suggesting maybe a different redevelopment. And definitely would appreciate any input that council can steer on this. Again, the downtown mobility study was really this particular intersection. The four-way infamous intersection caught a lot of attention. I think there's a lot of opinions on how it should be fixed. And we're working on that, but this is an opportunity to do that. This work is still ongoing. It's not nailed down. It's going to be influenced heavily by how the transit exchange may function, as well as how Commercial Street may function. Thank you. So three basic concepts behind what we may or may not do with Commercial. Keep it as is with a two-way routing, which obviously challenges the intersection, the opportunity to do something with the intersection. Option to have it one way. Here we see it, one way from Wallace towards Terminal. And that would perhaps feed into the mayor's previous question. If Commercial further up was one way, then that would be a natural fit. Or the option is to close it and make it just a public-friendly pedestrian or cyclists. Again, nothing has been set in stone on this. What will help define this is somewhat the commercial street master plan that Mr. Corson spoke about, and the other part is the transit redevelopment strategy that the regional district and the city are working on together, and so the needs of transit will help inform this. I spoke a little bit about the property, as council is well aware, and the public is too. The properties along Terminal Avenue, so-called 500 block, have been acquired this year. So the Gene Burns is the orange triangular piece, which the current concepts show that we need to have as a pull-off lane for the transit exchange, which will hit the next two buildings, the tattoo parlor and Imprint, together with the city-owned parking lot at alongside Shaw Lane, the current 9 spaces, all is envisioned to form part of the transit exchange. The balance of city right-of-way, which is in the gray, is also highlighted. So public engagement, council's aware that we had a public sort of open house. We actually closed commercial as a bit of a trial run. Maybe it was, just to try it on. It seemed to created some space and openness for the COVID considerations. We're still, our consultants are still digesting and compiling all the information. I've got a slide here in a minute that shows our initial first blush, but almost 1,000 interactions, which is quite significant for a relatively small, relatively short project, which just highlights the level of public interest. So there's a number of things that you can see on your slide here that, the opportunity to improve safety, improve revitalization for the area. As council's talked about, it's redevelopment. This is a key redevelopment site. It's, it has triggered the owners of A and B Sound to come forward and start to share plans and start to tie this together. So that's precisely what, it's triggering investment in our downtown, which is precisely what we'd like to see. And certainly one of the things that we heard about was this potential for social disorder and creating some concerns around that. I know that BC Transit's experience with transit exchanges, there's very rarely social disorder in that area. There's so much busyness that that element that wants to be disruptive tends to stay away. Certainly we're alive to concerns about loss of parking, and there's, it's a relatively small number of parking spots that may be affected, and there's other parking areas in the near neighborhood that are there, but it's something that we're not ignoring for sure. So the further information will be forthcoming, of course, to council. So I would say that, again, if council has a strong feeling and hopefully this is a bit of a catalyst for your discussion about what we can do with the remainder of the Gene Burns site, we'd love to hear that, and we can focus our attention there. I think some of the work that's ongoing is around the transit exchange and Commercial Street. Those are really, we're hoping that in the next several months that we'll have that resolved. And a few times it's been mentioned, I think, talking about end of trip facilities for cyclists. I think this is an opportunity certainly to have something like that. Perhaps a public washroom. This has been some of the feedback we've heard. One of the questions that is hanging out there is, what do we do in the meantime? It's going to be some time before the site gets completely redeveloped. You'll see Terminal Avenue starting to happen in the spring or summer, and we hope to have Terminal Avenue quite a bit far advanced by this time next year. But the transit exchange and the buildings, there's an opportunity or a question about what do we do. So we've just populated some 3 basic options there. One of them is to remediate the environmental concerns and then fill it and create some sort of a park, which is a fair bit of money for something that council may choose to remove later, all the way down to improving the screening of the site, putting up some hoarding and having it as a public art or a public communication space. I'd be happy to hear any comments you have on that as well. We estimate it's probably in the $250,000 range. That's a ballpark to remediate some of the previous contamination. Over the next several months, we'll be following up with the public consultation, the What We Heard report. Our consultant is working on that, and we'll bring that in front of council, as well as we'll follow up with some of those key stakeholders, such as transit and the downtown BIA, et cetera, and the Victoria Crescent Group. As mentioned, we're working on tender preparation for Terminal Avenue itself. So we'll see that that's a construction tender that's budgeted, it's ready to go, and we expect to start that in late spring. And then again, we just really want to keep this in front of council and have as many touch points as we can. So as we learn more information, we'll bring more stuff back to you. I think that concludes. I'd be happy to take any questions or hear any comments.
Thank you, Mr. Sims. I have Councillor Armstrong, I believe.
Thank you, Mr. Sim. 2 points. One where we're talking about a transit exchange, and we actually looked at a transit depot. And the second point on that one, and I have another one, is you mentioned that BC Transit told you that there's not a lot of issues around transit exchanges, which I would beg to differ with. They have 236 police officers to deal with just the issues that happen at transit exchanges. So that's my question. Is there more issues at a transit exchange or a transit depot? Could that be looked at when you're looking at that? Because there's a big difference between an exchange and a depot. And my second question, when we're talking about the safety for all, I heard from some ambulance people that are concerned about some of the changes that are upcoming. When we're doing our consultations, are ambulance and police included in this, not just fire?
Mr. Sims.
Mr. Chair, I think through to Councillor Armstrong's points, this is intended to be an exchange as opposed to a central depot, similar to, you might have intracity buses, but this is just an exchange for essentially transit buses. But we can certainly confirm that with BC Transit, their experiences there. And as far as consultation with emergency services, yes, I can confirm that we'll do that.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Mr. Sims. A while ago, I thought I remember some discussion about, particularly the Gene Burns site, is to fill it and then try to put it on the market for redevelopment. Is that still on the table, or is that something that we're past that now?
No, thanks, Mr. Chair. Through you to Councillor Turley, I think we'd really appreciate hearing council's preferences on exactly that. So there's a lot of questions to answer, of course, and it's, the potential is, the simple answer is fill it and create some sort of a public plaza, but certainly what's loud and clear, not only from, as I mentioned, from the public, but from our own urban design staff, is that, how many public plazas do you need in a downtown core? So that the next sort of obvious one may be some sort of a retail facility or some sort of building, and that's absolutely on the table. And I think there's going to be a significant amount of the Gene Burns site that's remaining, and that's an opportunity. And if council's starting to gain some interest in that side of things, I think that's what we're hearing from not only the community, but I think we'd like to hear that as well from council. If that's tickles your fancy, then we can go away and do some more thinking and prepare some more interest on that.
Thanks, Mr. Sims. And just process-wise, we have some other councillors. Questions for Mr. Sims. We will have 4 delegations, and then at that point we can have some discussion. And if there's direction that emerges to refine some of the concept exploration, that would be totally appropriate through that discussion. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. I do have some comment and questions for Mr. Sims. I just didn't know if it was appropriate to ask those now or after the delegation.
Questions for Mr. Sims are good, but they'll be later. We can get those questions for him as well if you still have some.
Okay. Thank you. Then through you to Mr. Sims. Thank you, Mr. Sims. Appreciate your work on this. In my mind, the acquisition of the Gene Burns property is probably the most significant move that the city has made in terms of land development since the building of this facility, the conference center, and it's absolutely huge, and it's a tremendous opportunity. It relates to the very core or hub of our city, of course, and I think the most important thing for me is that we really need to proceed cautiously, and we need to get this right. We need to take the time that this piece of land that we're talking about, the Gene Burns property, is used to its best purpose. So I don't want to be rushed on this. I don't want to feel that I am being pushed into 2 or 3 options and that's it. And I know that's not the case, but I think there is maybe a perception in the public that there is. To me, and I'll take your advice on this, the Gene Burns hub site should be part of a conversation of a bigger picture. And we heard earlier this afternoon about Diana Krall Plaza, the northern part of Commercial Street. And to me, this should go together with those 2 projects. It should all be one consideration of how we want to see our downtown core developed. So what do we want to see on this site? And when the city obtained the land, I supported it, and it was on the understanding that there was an opportunity for a transit exchange. But I also have real concerns about how the balance of the property is going to be used, and I think that's what we have to give good consideration to. I would want assurance that this is the best site for a transit exchange, and maybe I've missed something, but I don't think council has heard the RDN Transit's opinion on this, or whether they feel there's other options that are available. So I'd be curious about that. I think there's an opportunity to improve density in our downtown with the remaining land, and maybe there are constraints with structural engineering, I don't know, but I think it's something that should be looked at. I guess what I got from your report was we're tying this project in with the terminal, call it the terminal project. To me, it should be part of the entire Commercial Street project, not just that one end of Commercial Street, but the entire downtown Commercial Street / terminal area. So that's what I would like to see occur, and I think it will involve a discussion by council of our vision for that whole area. And maybe we need to take more time and get more visioning exercising done. But that's just my thought. I'd be very interested in the results of the survey from the hub site, the public survey. And I guess I want to come back to my main point, which is I think we really need to go carefully on this and make sure that we're going to use that land for the best possible purpose for our downtown's vitality. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I wasn't sort of clear that this was really a coherent vision from not only from this end all the way up to Dallas Square, I apologize, because it really is in staff's mind across all departments. This is all part and parcel. It's not that we're sort of narrow focused on one particular project to the exclusion of the others. This is really a coherent vision. We really want to tie all of this together so that the look and feel that comes out of the Commercial Street Master Plan extends all the way through to Victoria Crescent. And Terminal Avenue essentially is a less of a highway commercial feel and more of a downtown arterial feel. So it's all integrated, it's all coherent. I think that's one of the key messages that I'd like to leave you with.
Thank you.
Council, I would just ask that we ask questions of Mr. Sims now, and then we'll go to the delegations, and then we'll get in, if we want to start expressing, I think that would be the appropriate time. I'm just cognizant of time and that it might be some lengthy discussion. So, Councillor Martman.
I'll save it till after the delegations. Thank you.
Councillor Hemmens.
Thank you. Mr. Sims, can you tell me what problem are we trying to fix with slowing the traffic on that section of commercial?
On this.
So either keeping it as is, or I'm sensing, either going one way or shutting it down completely. What are we trying to do there? What problem are we trying to fix?
There's a few. Part of it is to create some comfort for pedestrians. That's a biggie, and to recreate maybe the corridor feel that was there. There was a nice draw from one side of commercial to the other with the gallery that was along the old Gene Burns site. So that's one element. Another element is there's no real way to deal with the crazy intersection, the four-way intersection, without doing some impact to commercial. So in the past, Highways has been reluctant to create a four-way stop, which seems to be an intuitive, good solution. But a four-way stop would create backing up onto the highway and interference. So that's kind of one of the main drivers here.
Thank you.
Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I'll try and be quick because I have a number of questions to ask Mr. Sims. I'll ask those later and the delegations, but I want to give them some idea of where I'm coming from. Just firstly, on the present rough drawings, what percentage of the totality of the land that is now the city's are in fact devoted to the potential of a transit exchange? Ballpark.
I'm really just.
You can defer to Mr. Corson or Mr. Lindsay, or.
I'm thinking it's in the range of 50%.
Okay.
Chair, I'm just having the PowerPoint brought back up, and then perhaps that'll help you, Mr. Sims.
Thank you.
I mean, I'm speculating that it's somewhat less than 50%, and certainly much of the commentary we've received from the public has been around the concept you're wasting this entire space with even thinking about a transit exchange. And so I'm doing this for public educational purposes today. Now, we are hoping to funnel people to downtown through Albert Street and improvements. The delegation, and I'm looking at all of them, speaking for downtown business, they do not wish to see that little section of commercial cut off because it will have an impact presumably on business, and I'm making assumptions here. Is there anything terribly wrong with the concept that you would come down Albert, and once you hit the intersection with Wallace, you'd then have one way to cross over commercial, taking you to the downtown parkades under this center, and if you're anxious to go to Port Place, cut right through to Front Street, swing right, come and park at Port Place, and at the same time taking that existing chunk of commercial, converting it to one way, so that when you come into downtown, you go right off that onto that less than palatable intersection, and at the same time when you're coming from the south end of town, you're going to turn one way right on Commercial Street and go up Commercial Street. The reason I raise all this is because every city that has an historic downtown has to face this problem, and Victoria is a prime example. They've had one-way streets for a very long time that when you first move there may look a little problematic, but in fact it works fairly efficiently once you're used to it. And I appreciate that there are many citizens like myself and Councillor Turley and Councillor Thorpe who've been here a while. But I'm just wondering, setting aside the transit exchange, and what I'm suggesting, I don't know that it would make that impossible. Is that a way to relieve the traffic congestion that we face on Albert and Wallace and Commercial now, and at the same time offer, yes, it's a little, I won't say imaginative, that's a complimentary term, but a different way of looking at this, because frankly, when you come out of the parking under this building, you can get back onto Commercial, and you can head out of town that way. You can swing around, you can come on Victoria Crescent. I mean, it may take a little more driving for some people, but it would be friendlier to pedestrians. There'd be more open space, and it leaves you open with some other possibilities with respect to this. And I throw that out because I'm going to ask something along these lines of how the delegations who've taken so much time today to listen and hear to this, is there anything that, from a traffic perspective in managing traffic, certainly as it exists now, that is really problematic about that possibility?
That was a good preamble, Your Worship.
Lengthy as always. Long.
And the answer is no. But quite candidly, from a traffic volume point of view, this is technically not really needed. But from a networking point of view, it does help relieve some of the congestion on other streets. So, and it does provide that flexibility. So certainly the full closure is somewhat controversial. Fully open is not necessarily serving the community's interests, so the one-way certainly may be a viable alternative.
If I may add to that, Your Worship, just because I see the project engineer over there, I understand all options are being explored from some of the questions I've fired their way. So,
yep.
Thank you, Chair.
Council, any questions for Mr. Sims? Like I said, we will have an opportunity later as well.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Rudolph.
Just to add to Mr. Sims' presentation, so we're hearing conversation about land use for the Gene Burn site. There's a set of conversation around that. There's also conversation around Commercial Street and the functionality of the road. So there's a decision point at some point around that. And there's also alignment with so we've got transit, we've got commercial, and we've got land use. So we've got the transit piece, which a decision will have to be made. And at some point in time, it would be nice to engage people that actually use the transit system to see what their voice is in this, because there's been feedback in the past when it was relocated from Prudhoe down the hill. So I think the user community there will probably have something useful to say in terms of its convenience and proximity to their destinations. So I just wanted to say there's a lot of moving parts on this, and you probably need to compartmentalize these into these decision pieces. And the benefit of having these other two presentations today is to show that there's unique pieces of this that need more particular attention. Diana Krall in the hub area, and even that needs to be broken out, because a large part of the transit component is in behind the existing buildings and doesn't really use that triangle, which I think is part of the problem. And then even there was another one basically minorly mentioned earlier about Tideline Park. There was a project to go ahead on improving that site, and that was tabled to make sure that whatever comes out of this exercise aligns with it as all of this together. So I think we're simply putting this on the table. We need to organize our decision points and a process to get there over the coming while. In addition to that, the Ministry of Transportation has agreed to fund a road improvement for a terminal adjacent to this. We've got a lot of moving parts, and so there will be some improvements taking place down in the area. And I think we can visit randomly each of these topics, or you might want to unpack them one at a time and then come back. And I think whatever is chosen for the Gene Burn site needs to be done in sort of a business case fashion. What are the pros and cons, the costs, and those types of things? And sort of have an informed set of information to make a decision on that. Right now, it's a blue sky situation in terms of the ultimate use of that site. And in the absence of something specific, it would remain as either a public plaza or something that's left as a vacant site with a nice awning around it. So I think the intent today, firstly, council asked for this to come back based on feedback from the preliminary day that the street was closed. You remember it was a 4-hour period on that Saturday when things seemed to work fairly good because I was down there myself. But nonetheless, and that's perhaps a provocative comment, but it's happened in the past, and maybe for special events that would be another version of this. And in fact, that's a version of what could happen for Commercial Street, the whole redo, because you may find yourselves, the city wanting to have events and close that street more often, car-free days and so forth. And so that street the infrastructure can go into that street to facilitate that through that process. So the same could be for this site. So I think we should possibly just have a bunch of ideas today, come back with a more structured set of decision points as things unfold with more public opinion and that type of thing. So otherwise, so I think right now it's just visioning and get it on a table and see what you think, and then we can come back with things on each of those that would, I would hope, ultimately inform decision-making moving forward. That was awful long, but that was just a set of thoughts.
Thanks, Mr. Rudolph. See no additional hands, so we might come back to hear Mr. Sims. I expect we will, but we will go to delegations. We have 4 on this item. First up, Mr. Dan Appel. I'm sure you know the drill by this point.
Okay, I have 3 major concerns as of now with this project as it's been presented. The first one was with the public engagement, which I felt was very inadequate, manipulative, in some ways deceptive. It's not the proper way to do engagement at all. I don't think I have to say with respect, it wasn't done in a way that would be of standard if a planner was actually significantly involved at this stage. And I do think the second concern is this should be led at this stage by a planner, an accomplished planner, someone who knows what they're doing as far as planning goes. This is an extremely critical, very important part of our downtown. And the skill set that a planner brings to this would be very, very useful right now. Right now. The people who are leading this are not really appropriate for this. And this is verified by the material that's been presented to us thus far. There seems to be a very extreme lack of sophistication with regard to the planning of this site so far. That's the major concern for me. The other thing is related to some of the promises made when Diana Krall Plaza was first proposed. They're identical to the ones that were made here. And they don't really have any sort of relevance to the actual site itself. So you're making promises that, to my mind, ring hollow. And those won't really be resolved, I doubt, until you put a planner of some skill. I'm looking at you, Dr. Whitty, or someone who Dr. Whitty can suggest in charge of this project. And I'm hoping that that plan would be able to inform a design. And I think once the planning is complete, you can approve of that, and you can approve of the design, and then the design can be passed on to the engineers to be developed and built. But at this stage, clearly people who don't have the training or the background to lead this project are involved in this. And let's try and reconceive the project not as a transportation issue. It's not roads that we're redesigning here. It's not bicycle paths. It's public space. And public space has to be the primary concern right now. And the only people who can really handle that properly are people involved in, skilled people involved in planning at the moment. Later on, there'll be other people involved. But for now, we don't have that. And that's a very dear concern.
Thank you, Mr. Appel. Council, any questions for Mr. Appel? I see none.
So can I add one little thing? We know that making mistakes, planning mistakes, can be extremely hard to fix and very expensive. Let's try not to do that here.
Thank you. Our second delegation is Ms. Carla Sampson. Welcome to the podium, and you have 5 minutes when you get there.
Good afternoon. I'm an owner of Quintessential in downtown. We've been operating, we're in our 17th year, and I've lived and worked in the downtown area for over 30 years. I've seen the ups and downs of the downtown area. In the past 10 years, it's started to flourish again. I am here today to ask you to strongly reconsider the concept of putting a bus exchange at 246 Commercial Street, the two adjacent properties, and City of Nanaimo parking lot that houses, it says 9 on the plans, but it's more like 16 parking spots. And after seeing the plans, I realized it's not the whole area that is going to be bus exchange, but a good portion of it is. And I have some points to why I believe this would not be a good location for the bus exchange. We need more residential and business in this area, and by putting a bus exchange, this would decrease the density by using a prime location. Some of the points are Victoria Crescent and that little bit of commercial has always struggled with having a flow from Commercial Street onto it. Now that the Gene Burns building is gone, it probably has struggled 100 times more than it did even in the past 15 years. By putting an open space bus exchange in this location, I believe it would solely cut it off. Having bus shelters, because with the exchange, I'm assuming there would be bus shelters for people to take cover on with weather conditions. This would just bring in problems of having loiterers use the space for different means than just waiting for the bus. You would have to enforce the removal of people taking shelter in these spaces and prevent people from congregating in this area for other means other than taking the bus. There would be would there be a huge congestion problem in regards to the Island Highway? Obviously, I'm not a planner. This isn't my expertise, but there is a pedestrian stop now that's just very close in proximity to the actual light on Terminal Avenue and Commercial Street. And now if there was a bus exchange there, this light would be going on nonstop all day. So there is not only going to be the red light to stop at that intersection, but then just a short distance away having to stop for the pedestrian crossing. And I heard that there potentially might be another flashing light where TD Bank is, which again would now mean 4 potential stops in that short distance. I'm not sure if that light's going in. It was just something someone kind of said to me after I mentioned about the pedestrian light and the actual highway light. Another thing, I don't know if it's been considered, is a lot of people taking the bus now solely get off at Port Place Mall to do shopping. They use the shopping carts quite a bit, and there is a shopping cart return right at the actual exchange. You might find that there now becomes a problem of shopping carts being abandoned at either the border of the actual Port Place Mall parking.
1 minute. Sorry.
Okay, sorry. A few years back, there was a design team that worked on the transportation hub. I feel this is kind of something that should be considered in where the bus exchange goes, in the sense that a transportation hub, there's now the fast ferry going to be coming in. That's supposed to be now coming for spring. There's Gabriela Ferry. There's people coming up from the dock where the boat dock. So having an area that allows that to be close to those areas that more people are going to be taking the bus from. There's been other city centers that have put bus exchanges. Like example, Winnipeg, they actually just had to remove their bus exchange from the downtown core because of so many ongoing problems. I did start a petition for people to have an opinion on this bus exchange. I have received over 910 people who have signed the petition with not in favor of having a bus exchange in this location. And I'm just here to represent those people and strongly suggest not having a bus exchange in this location.
Thank you, Ms. Sampson. Council, any questions for Ms. Sampson? You don't show up on my queue. Your worship.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your presentation. I appreciate the comments about the bus exchange, but as I gave fair warning to everybody, I want to ask you about what I've suggested, because I assume there is a concern around the changes that may occur to the street patterns, and the one I'd suggested of one-waying that little chunk of commercial so it gets you onto Wallace, and one way across the intersection of Albert, Wallace, et cetera, that would take you down into the hotel, into the parkades. Do you have any comment on that? And one way in Commercial Street, up, so to speak. You come off from the south end, you hang a right, and you're on Commercial Street, passing the conference center, headed up the street.
Well, I mean, I think the flow would work, but I don't think that has anything to do with putting a bus exchange in this location. I just think we're going to have the same occurrence of problems with having an open space like we did with Diana. And I just think we need more density. We need more residential. We need more hotels. We need a lot more things in that prime location than a bus exchange.
Are you suggesting then that the city developers or sell the property or ask for bids that the property be disposed of with the view to, you know, presumably high rises all over the site? Or
I mean, I would rather see residential. I mean, obviously there's a limit on how high buildings can go in that area, but as a business owner, I would rather see businesses and residential there than a bus exchange. That's, you know, my personal opinion. And again, I'm not educated in that or anything, but I have been downtown a long time and seen how the flow of traffic. And I know the more stores that we have downtown, the more restaurants, it means more people. So we already have half an empty street. By putting a bus exchange, I don't think that entices new businesses to say, oh, okay, it's really developing downtown. So.
Thank you.
See no one else on my speakers. Oh, Councillor Armstrong, waving on the screen.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Sampson, for your presentation and raising your concerns. Do you think if the social disorder starts to get under control that your clients would be more comfortable parking over at the conference center?
Potentially. That's a whole other matter, because I've always said probably 75% of the people that come into my store don't even know about the conference center parking. Even being at the conference center for over 5 years, having my business there, don't know anything about it because there's no strong indication that there's parking in that area. I think we should address that too and have some big Ps put up to indicate where it is, lit actual indications of parking, and maybe they would use it more.
Thank you very much, and thanks again for taking the time to come speak to council.
Thank you, Ms.
Thanks for your
Anthony.
time.
Up next, we have Mr. Grant Payne. Welcome, and you have 5 minutes to address council.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. I kind of come at this from a more limited, self-involved kind of way. I'm a musician. I'm also the president of the Nanaimo Blues Society and the artistic director for the Summertime Blues Festival. So everything we do is very vested in the downtown area. We do a lot of performances at the Queen's Hotel, and the idea of taking away the public parking spaces, the very limited public parking spaces, and sticking buses there does not help us in any way, shape, or form, simply because there's such limited parking close enough. Our contingent of people that come to our shows are typically seniors, 55 plus, so they're not terribly interested in walking long distance to get from a parking spot. So there's very limited parking in front of the Queens. The parking behind the Queens goes away. And then the little bit of parking that's on the portion of Commercial Street that talking about closing, that's going to cause a lot of problems for our patrons to get in for shows. The other thing I addressed when I came down to the consultation was, as a musician that has to load in heavy amplifiers and other heavy gear, I was concerned about access to the loading ramp at the back of the Queens. The other issue that I'm concerned with, I'm also a broadcaster on CHLY. I do 2 shows a week at CHLY, and I park in Lois Lane, directly in front of the radio station, which, if you're not aware, is in the basement of the Queens on Lois Lane. So all of those things, from my perspective, it's just not a workable idea. And the idea of having the Gene Burns space as a public square or a public park, with all the social issues that are going on downtown, I just think is a non-runner. If that space was redeveloped to use as some sort of mixed residential commercial on the bottom level, that to me would make much more sense than park space or any type of public space in there. In the time that I've been on CHLY, I've had 3 drug overdoses when going in to do my shows. I've had a knife pulled on me once. That whole area is experiencing social issues of a very major concern. And the other thing I would like to say to you is, if I can just backtrack a little to the Diana Krall Plaza, I would be delighted to offer my services to help coordinate music programs, to bring music to that space, both as blues, jazz, or all the other musical options that are out there. There's very few musicians on this island that I don't know, so I would be more than happy to offer my expertise to that. Mr. Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Payne. Council, any questions? Your worship.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Payne, for your comments and your presentation. And I'm going to go with Ms. Sampson's figures around how many parking spots would be lost if the transit exchange, if a transit exchange goes in and we half close off Commercial Street. Let's assume for a moment it is 18 spaces, and let's assume, as we are wont to do in this country, generally stick no more than 2 people in a car. That's 36 people who, based on your argument, wouldn't be able to get to the Queens, and yet a transit bus fully loaded probably would dump off 50 or 60 people and could do so every 15 or 20 minutes or half an hour. And I'm just wondering what you've got to say to that response. And I'm not a transit user, but it strikes me, if you're being deposited right behind the Queens in a transit bus without having to worry about parking, you may well be more compensated in terms of audience participation by the transit exchange than you would be by keeping the parking spaces. I
understand your perspective, Mr. Mayor. I honestly don't know the answer to that one. It's, I'm not sure how participants coming to concerts are going to be interested in using public transit. It's an unknown quantity for me from that standpoint. From our festival at Maffeo Sutton Park, transit really is not an issue or an option there. Like, it's not that it's not available, it's just, it's not something I see being used in any way to attend our event.
The reason I raise it is that I'm trying to be forward-looking in terms of how this city will develop and grow. I mean, right now, in the evening, all those good people in the North End who are mauled to death, and I use that term advisedly, could drive to North Nanaimo Town Centre, Woodgrove potentially, hop and park the car at 6 o'clock. We've worked in conjunction with the Regional District and Transit, and during the Blues Festival, you can get yourself downtown and you're dropped off right downtown at the Transit Exchange and or other venues. I throw this out because this is a very important day in terms of the public discussion around these issues. And for instance, I'll ask the question, because I should ask a question, as the chair will remind me. Would the Blues Festival Society or the Jazz Festival Society or any other society be prepared to work in conjunction with the transit in the city to ensure that for those kinds of events where you have to get or want to get thousands literally of people downtown, that you in fact engage in that kind of process? Because many of the events that you're talking about would be happening in the evening.
I would be delighted to engage in that type of discussion and make use of whatever programs we could come up with that would help facilitate bringing more people to our events. So I'm not against any of those types of things. It's just, this one, as I said, is, my perspective is very self-serving because it's from a very limited perspective. You know, a lot of the other people have very differing experience based on whether they live or have stores in the particular area. I'm not there all the time. I'm there a lot, but not all the time. So it's one of the things that I would really like to see is better thought on the usage of the Gene Burns portion of the space. Because I think that will be the thing that will either make or break this particular development.
And if I may, do you have some specific, I assume for a moment it's never going to be a transit exchange there. What would you do with the space? Ms. Sampson suggested commercial space and residential.
Again, I personally think that would be a good use of the space. Some commercial activity on the street level, and then some residential space above, which will help draw more people to the downtown and have them living there and participating in the events and the stores and the businesses and the restaurants that are in the immediate area. So I think that would be a much better use of the space.
Thank you.
Thank you. Council, any additional questions for Mr. Payne? I see none, so thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you.
I'm getting a little concerned with his worship sitting in that chair. He might be taking the bus home after this meeting here. Up next, Mr. Kevin Shaw. Welcome, and you have 5 minutes.
Don't start it yet. I get the glasses on here. Getting old. You're also young now. Used to be different, Mayor Crow. Used to be different.
You're still feisty, though, so here we go.
Hi, Kevin Shaw, President, Victoria Crescent Association. Others wanted to be here, but they're busy, working. You do have some of their letters, and I've got some hard copies here. Many in the area are concerned that closing that bit of commercial street to vehicle traffic between the old A&B Sound and the Gene Burns buildings will cause hardships for merchants and their patrons. Some say they will close. Now, when construction blocks the road, some businesses shut down for the day as there is less business. As well, such a road closure will stop those coming from the north from turning right into our area, making it so you have to go around to Esplanade, which has already become more of a bottleneck, especially since the readjustments to Victoria Road and its intersection with Esplanade. The proposed street closure at Terminal and Commercial could isolate our area, bringing with it further social disorder and crime problems. A transit exchange will remove parking to businesses, and there are safety issues that will likely come. Today, we did count 16 to 17 parking spaces that will be lost, and another 8 spots that would be lost on Commercial Street. We should remember the tremendous amount of input and work that was done for a transportation center on the waterfront. And with a new fast ferry likely coming in the spring, I am told by some connected to the Nanaimo that they are very interested in having dialogue council to council. There are phenomenal transportation centers on the waterfront in other cities around the world: transit, bus, ferry, light rail, and seaplane connectivity together. A great idea, if it can happen, is a multi-use building replacing the hole in the ground of that Gene Burns site. We've heard soil samples have been better than expected, and a 4-story building might be built. Businesses and cafes below, as you've been told, condos above. Maybe condos for seniors who don't drive. Perhaps a Chinese element to it, around it, as the China Steps are there, and this is where our first Chinatown began in the 1860s. Something monumental to draw people across Terminal, and fingers crossed for the A&B site too. More people living in our area, more residents taking ownership of it. And thank you all for looking at improving our downtown. Parks are great. We don't need another one to be fenced off. City staff, they've been awesome to work with, great, and we all want the very best. I know we do. And on a personal note, my family and I have been on the Cres for 74 years, and we want to see the very best too. This is a monumental undertaking, as you're hearing, but it has seemed rushed at times. And since the project was publicly announced just 3 months ago, there doesn't seem to be as much input or consultation as there usually is. And usually, before property is bought by the city, there's options to buy until all the input's done and the sorting out. But we know there needs to be more talk. We've indeed got to get this right. Look what's happened to Crowell Plaza, we've heard. And a mere 10 years ago, Commercial was named one of the best streets in Canada. Now we are looking at improving all. And funding sources are always around, I'm told. I appreciate there being much more thought and much more consultation. Chemainus has murals as a draw. Victoria, Old English charm. Leavenworth, Washington's downtown, is Bavarian. La Conner, Washington, nautical, and so on. We have our marine heritage, our fishing, logging, coal mining, First Nations, Chinese heritage, and so forth. Let's be unique and draw residents and tourists here. I appreciate you listening and all the work council and staff do. And don't forget, got to get a plug in, the Lions Christmas Parade through downtown Saturday, November 27th, 5 p.m. We'll have a tree light up and some hot chocolate for you on the Crescent. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. A little off topic there at the end, but we'll permit it.
Thank you for not interrupting me, Chair.
Council, any questions? Your worship.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Shaw, for everything you've done. And I realize it was a bit of a curveball. I threw it out today because I want to generate as much controversy and discussion as I possibly can.
You're good at that.
Yes, I am. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'll take it as a compliment. Because this is important, and this is our premier intersection. This is the center of Nanaimo, quite literally. And so you talked about the complete closure of commercial as being a real problem, but what about what I've suggested in terms of a one-way right off that little, from the off the terminal on that little section, and pushing one way across the existing horrible intersection through to the back of the conference center, taking you to the front door of the hotel. So you're coming down Albert, and it'll be a tough intersection, two close intersections together. I acknowledge that on terminal itself, but you'll be able to come from the university downtown right to parking, not far from Victoria Crescent and its merchants. And at the same time, coming from the north end, you'll be able to swing in on the right if you wish, off Terminal Avenue. I'm interested in your comments.
So through the chair, your worship, then are you talking coming down Albert and going one way left through that little little bit of commercial street, or the other way?
You would literally you'd be able to cross Albert and end up on a one-way street right through the Gene Burns property now, essentially. That would be one way across the road, down and across terminal, down behind the conference center.
So you're talking the designs that I saw a while back, that was the bus path coming down Albert Street and going straight across parallel to the China Steps, just to the left, and straight down across there. Is that what you're talking for driving?
That's what I'm talking about, although I've never seen those plans. And then, as I say, when you come into town along Terminal Avenue and you get to the intersection of Commercial and Terminal, you've come from the north end, you've got a one-way right on that little section of Commercial. You've widened Commercial, you've allowed for more pedestrian use, bicycle use, if you will. You've allowed for restaurants, perhaps, or whatever, to have patio space. You've allowed for potentially a town square there, something. There's a multitude of things, but all I'm suggesting is that we be a little more imaginative with the use of one-way streets in the core of our downtown, pretty much as Victoria's been forced to do. So if you're coming down Albert, you're going to be able to cross the street, or if you wish, you can turn right and head up Victoria Crescent, and you can turn still left on Wallace if you wish. It's not going to solve all the problems of that intersection, but it would give you access from Albert straight down and across into parking, so that you could spend your day happily wandering downtown. If I'm a tourist coming from North Island or Victoria, I'm going to come in off the Parkway potentially and down that street.
So you would need to put another traffic light, like Carla was saying. So we've got a traffic light at Terminal and Commercial. Now you've got one at Gordon Street there going straight down. And then you've got, if the bus exchange did happen, you've now got flashing lights near where Imprint was, flashing to let the buses come out of Shaw Lane towards the TD Bank. Then you've got another stoplight at that major intersection at Esplanade and Nickel. Is that correct?
The precise location of a transit exchange may not even be part of this. I'm throwing this out as a concept generally. But you could have perhaps a smaller transit exchange further up. I just think I want comments in a general sense about this intersection from everybody. I don't have a firm plan. I'm not even wed to what I've said today.
I fear, if I might interrupt here, I fear we might start debating concepts that we don't have fleshed out fully. But if I think I could paraphrase the question, it would be: is the delegation favorable to increase traffic flow, utilizing the site to ensure that people move in and out of the respective downtown areas better?
Chair Brown, without being a traffic expert, it's definitely a curveball that His Worship threw at me. It's something to consider, because talking with you and others, it was, one of the designs was the buses coming in through that very way you're talking. So it's something else above my pay grade, and probably yours too, for what you make. And that would be something that would have to be looked at, because we do have a problem now with the $500,000 that was done at the park there below the Firehouse Grill, and taking out that right turn lane coming down Victoria, whereas now, if somebody is turning right, let's say the first car coming down Victoria, turning right onto Esplanade, there's no right turn lane there. So you've got all the traffic backed up. And now with coming the other way from where you're talking, the China Steps, top of the China Steps coming that way, you do have vehicle traffic backed up when a car is turning left at the new stop sign there, and new crosswalk, turning left onto that little bit of Esplanade to get onto the highway. And it's backed up sometimes right to Mumbo's Pizza. So it's something that would have to be looked at, and definitely looked at a lot more, I believe, and others, than was done for the Heritage Square Park area that was redeveloped during the summer. And Victoria, our city, a lot more hills. We're right on the water, our downtown. And I know Victoria is too, but it's bigger, but there's more parallel streets there. And we've got a lot of cliffs, Cliff Street, and we've got a more limited amount of roadway in the downtown. So when you make one-ways, you have to go a long way around. Because if you didn't have that right turn, and you took a little while, so Chair, indulgence, please. So if you're coming over the Pearson Bridge and you're coming southbound, if you don't have that right turn there at the A&B Sound Building, pretty well you'd have to turn at Comox Road. And this, so Nanaimo's got a lot of weaves, and it's a lot more than Victoria. So I don't like comparing that to Victoria. Thank you for that long-winded continuation.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, and thank you for taking the time to be here, Mr. Shaw. I just wanted to let you know too that area on Victoria and Esplanade, which you're talking about, is being monitored by staff for issues. But my question is the same as I asked Ms. Sampson. Do you think, after hearing her response, do you think if we did have better signage that we would get more people utilizing the parking lot at the center?
Well, you'd get some through the chair, Councillor Armstrong. Sure, you'd get some and better signage. And I've been in a lot of cities, as many of you have been, no doubt, where you've actually got, going into the cities or towns, you've got traffic boards listing the parking lots and how many spaces are available in each, and then better signage of how to get to them. The only problem I see, and quite frankly, with the building we're in and the parking underneath it, people, as Carla was saying, I'd say they are afraid to come down there. There's a lot of break-ins. Let's try not be negative and be very positive, because we all love our downtown. But there are problems in our parkades as well. And I know that most of my friends will not park in them. It's like going to a shopping center, kind of. They see where the main door is, and they try and park as close to that. At least there's line of sight. In the parkades, you're kind of wondering who's behind that car, who's behind the next corner. So I kind of doubt, this is my own feeling without a lot of research, that I don't think you would get a lot more, a whole bunch more people parking underground. But try everything you can to do it.
So just as a follow-up on that, so you feel that if those parking spots were removed, that many of the businesses in the area would lose customers?
I am told that by some of them now, yes.
Thank you.
Council, I have no one else on the list. So if there's no more questions for Mr. Shaw, I will thank you and the others for presenting his delegations today.
One more thing, if I may add, Chair, that I just thought of now about safety when I was thinking parking lots. In the panel that has grouped with staff and their consultants for the Hub project, I haven't heard if there is a bylaw component sitting in there. The RCMP is sitting in there, because when the Firehouse Grill Park. The lane was taken out there, the sidewalk extended, and a bit more park. I was told that there was no law enforcement involved in, some things that might have, added to the public disorder, unfortunately, that went on there. So I'd really want some more safety looked at as well.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Shaw.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, council. Lots to chew on, but we do have 40 minutes at least scheduled for discussion on this if we want to continue. So I have some thoughts, but I'll open the floor. Councillor Marmon.
Thank you. And just to thank you for all the presenters for being engaged and giving us your feedback. I'm usually one of the first to say how slow bureaucracy moves and how long it takes to get things done. But I concur with Councillor Thorpe and many of the speakers. This is one where we really do have to take our time. And just to give feedback to Mr. Sims, because we did have a slide up about 3 different alternatives with that Gene Burns site. I have heard from many in the community that really I think they're looking for retail and residential on that particular site, that they're wanting to see bring more vibrancy when we're talking about animation to our downtown. So I think that would take a lot of time. I'm for it. I'm all for doing that for our downtown. But in the meantime, because that could take years, we would need to have developers, et cetera, and the land would have to be sold, et cetera. I'm all for the $750,000 to make that area park so that we do have something to enjoy, that it improves our downtown until that time where we can look at something different. So I don't think it would be a lot of expenditure to put out, because the other alternative was $300,000 and that was basically just fencing it. So that's my personal thoughts, and I'm giving my 2 cents. Thank you.
Councillor Hemmets.
Thank you, Chair. And like Councillor Martman, I thank all the delegations. I disagree with Councillor Martman. I would prefer not to spend $700,000 on an interim measure, and particularly a park, because I think what we're hearing is that open spaces in that area are challenging. So I'm a fan of the $10,000 fix to get it just tidied and cleaned as we decide what we're going to do with it. I'm digesting a lot, but the one piece that I feel very, very strongly about is the Gene Burns site and having mixed commercial and residential on that site. Everything I know about downtown revitalization talks about having more people living downtown, and I think that would also support our efforts around the social disorder issues we're seeing, et cetera, et cetera. So strong opinion on the Gene Burns site and having mixed commercial residential there, and open to the rest of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Chair. So I've always been a fan of doing things step by step rather than jumping in wholeheartedly. And so I certainly would be in favor of filling the site. However, I think we need to do something with that site other than just fence it. Because by just fencing it and putting it potentially on the market for resale, I'm not convinced that that's going to be a big plus as far as a developer wanting to come in to put some significant money towards a project. So maybe in the meantime, in the interim, we could use that space for things like food trucks. If we could develop another market downtown, that's an ideal space. That has the benefit in my mind, and I may be corrected on this, of having the ability to not have a lot of, shall we call them, less savory individuals congregating there, because the site is being used for other opportunities. So until we get the decision on what exactly to do, I think leaving it as a whole, in my opinion, is not an option. We need to start doing something with that piece of property, and I think that might be the best thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Thorpe and then Councillor Armstrong.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I made a number of comments earlier, but I do have a question for Mr. Sims in a second. First of all, I agree with the concept in general of mixed-use residential on the Gene Burns land. I think we have to try and bring people to stay in our downtown. I don't know at this point whether there's room for that plus a transit exchange on that site, and I'm interested in that. As I said earlier and asked earlier, I need to be convinced that the experts feel that this is the preferred site for a transit exchange. And my question to Mr. Sims is related to something Ms. Sampson brought up, and that is the earlier study that was done some time back on a transportation hub, which interests me greatly, and recognizing that's quite different from a transit exchange. But I really like the idea of a central transportation hub involving ferries, seaplanes, buses, you name it. Is that still a possible component of where we would locate a transit exchange?
Mr. Chair, that was a concept, I think, when we had a stronger passenger rail system, and just you can envision all of the types of transport infrastructure that would sort of converge at that one location. Things have evolved, of course, since then. And one thing to clarify is that a transit exchange in this location does not preclude transit stops along Front Street. So that's something to underscore. There'd be at least one, perhaps more, and that's what we're working with the regional district. It's not like suddenly there's no buses on Front Street. That's an important point, I think. One of the main focuses is that a transit exchange along Front Street is challenging to develop in the context of the One Port Drive redevelopment. And it would be quite a bit of encroachment, let's say, into that site. And there's other complicating factors as well. One of them is that there's the potential for senior government funding. So there's that's sort of still to be determined and still to be chased, but this is part of what's driving this particular location as well.
Thank you. And if I may, Chair, a second question, and I can't resist because this afternoon I've heard Councillor Turley concerned about bicycles and bike storage. I've heard his worship going to be taking transit from the north end into downtown, and I've been biting my tongue to ask about automobile parking. So I think I better get it in now before this whole universe goes upside down. Seriously, I'm just wondering, Mr. Sims, as part of the research on this whole project, have we had any recent studies on the need for parking in downtown? And I mean that seriously because we reference the conference center parking, which even now, if a special event is on in normal times, the parking lot is full. Granted, that may not be often, but it does happen. And now we have a new hotel being built next door, which is assured of some of the parking spaces, which is in this conference center lot. So I'm just curious if there has been a recent survey on the need for downtown parking, and if so, if we could get the results of that at some point.
Mr. Chair, through to Councillor Thorpe, I think, thank you for the question, because yes, as part of the downtown mobility, we've done quite a large parking inventory, and we owe council that report back. And so that is there. It's one of many things that we want to bring back, a number of competing priorities, but certainly there's good knowledge of what the parking needs are, the parking uses, and where those are. And I take to heart some of those points that the delegation made about signage and improvements, and I think that's a very wise point that we need to really take into consideration. And it's a happy problem to have when it's so busy that it's struggling to find parking. That means we're really attracting people to the downtown.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And just to finish off, Chair, if I may, I think Mr. Rudolph had some very wise words a little while ago in the need to take this step by step and look at each decision point as we come to it. And I'm pleased to hear that strategy. And the other point that I wanted to make, which I'm sure will pop back into my mind any second now, if I wait long enough. No, it's not, but if I think of it, I'll let you know.
We'll come back. All right. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. Thank you for the discussion. You know, thinking back to what was said by Mr. Shaw, I think we should be looking at that option with SFN and the Port Authority, as I know that one of our airlines is looking to relocate from their downtown location due to issues, and they may be looking at that area as well. So I think that's an option we should be looking at, because it would be a very viable place with, you know, airplanes, fast ferry, and the helijet being there. So I think that's an option to look at. The other point is and I think, and I know, I don't want Don Bonner to have a headache or a heart attack here, so be ready, Don. I think one of the things that we could be looking at for that James Burns is a place for subsidized housing for seniors, because a lot of them do walk to everything, and there's everything down there that they need. It's within walking distance. They don't need parking. So to me, if we're ever going to do an experiment where there is no parking, that would be a great spot. And for me, I think it would be great for a place for seniors. And some people say, well, you want to have feet on the streets. The thing about seniors, they have eyes on the streets constantly. They're always looking out their windows to see what's going on. So I think that's an option that I would like to see, you know, explored further with residential and commercial. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Armstrong. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Chair. I hope I can be articulate in this. One of the reasons that I'm kind of leaning into changing the location of the bus exchange is that we have dollars from other levels of government saying, you know, kind of pitching into this pot of, we know we need a new bus loop in Nanaimo. The current One Port Drive bus loop, if we position it there, and, you know, we're talking today about terminal and commercial being kind of the heart of downtown, but I kind of see One Port Drive as our jewel that we're still kind of finessing, and we know, you know, we want housing down there, we know we want, you know, all sorts of things. I worry a little bit about having the first piece of infrastructure on that land being a bus terminal that then developers and plans have to work around. Could staff comment on that? I know that's really...
Through the chair, maybe I'll start, and Mr. Sims might want to jump in, but I think we sort of struggled with that very challenge when we did, after we purchased One Port Drive and went through the master planning process and looked at all these different concepts of having, a transit, beyond a transit exchange to a transit hub in that area with recognition of ferries and planes and all those discussions at the time. And I think where we landed was that a recognition of that land's extremely valuable and very important to the future of downtown. We don't have many opportunities to grow our downtown. And the plan right now calls for the land itself to be primarily used for mixed use, including, we've heard today a lot about the need for more people to live downtown. And that's what the plan calls for, more people living. I would say, if I had to generalize that plan, it's about more people living downtown in that area. Because of that, the concept plan that was done in recognition of the value of the land looked at using the roadway as the exchange. So actually putting the exchange in front of the property, basically between the mall and the property. I guess I'll describe it that way. As Mr. Sims mentioned, that creates other challenges down there. It creates challenges with how much road we'd have to take off the property. It created challenges in the interim of having your exchange on the periphery. There's other issues, as mentioned. There's known historic archaeological sites in the area that are sensitive, and we have to take those into account. So a whole number of factors that when we started looking at it, and this is not a new problem. The city has been struggling with where to put the transit exchange for, I don't know, I've been here 27 years, and I think it's been going on the entire time. So it's not a new discussion, but I think having weighed all those things, it brought to light that the opportunities on this site was twofold. One is it might be a better site. It's closer to the downtown. It's more centrally located. And also it addressed what was, in my mind, a major problem in that an area that needed some attention. Right? An area that there's for lack of a better word, a hole in the ground, and has been for many years, and an opportunity to look at some public investment, which has Mr. Corson, or I can't remember, maybe Mr. Sims said earlier today, we're already hearing that it's resulting in some public or private investment. And we've seen that over and over again. When the city takes steps for public investment, that private investment follows. So we're hopeful that if done right here, that could have the same impact. So sorry, that was kind of a long answer.
No, that was great. Thank you.
Going to go to Councillor Thorpe and then Councillor Bonner and Armstrong. I
Thank you,
assume
Chair.
he's remembered what he wanted to ask.
Yes. I remembered the last item I just wanted to comment on, and that is the short-term interim treatment options. And I personally feel that, yes, we'd be well served to fill in the site for now, but I don't think I could support spending a lot of money to create an interim park, given the reality of our social challenges right now. I think it might be money that would just, in fact, invite more problems. So I don't think I would support that. And beyond that, Chair, I just wanted to thank the delegations for taking the time to be here today, and also to thank staff for the work that they're putting into this. It's very challenging. There's a lot of steps involved, and we'll get there eventually, and we'll do what I think is best for our community. Thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Chair. I'm on a different headset now. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Much better.
Just let Councillor Thorpe know that the universe is collapsing in on itself. I'm not particularly in support of a bus exchange here either. This is actually probably the best place for a bus exchange. And thinking forward, as more people will be using buses in the future and less people will be using cars, if someone told me that they'd like to drop off a couple of hundred possible customers in my front door, I'd be all over it. But the people the majority of the people that I'm be talking to are not in favor of bus exchange here. So I'm not in favor of bus exchange here either. So I think you just have to think about this a little bit more, carry on. When we first talked about the possibility of expropriating this land years ago, when I was just talking with a couple of people about it, it was residential and commercial that we're looking to put in there, and there was no mention of a bus exchange at the time. I can tell you right now, the bus exchange on Front Street, where it is now, is not the most nicest place for a bus exchange. It's very uncomfortable, especially when it's windy and like it is now. But every time in downtown I'm taking the bus, I usually get off around the Wallace Albert area, and then I walk down to Front Street to pick it up. And if I get off on Front Street, I'll walk back to Wallace and Albert Street. So if it's one block here or one block there, I don't really think it makes any difference to people who are actually on buses. But quite honestly, the best place for it is where staff has suggested it would be, but I don't think that the majority of the population wants it there. So that's where I'm sitting. Thanks.
Thanks. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. 2 points. One was, I was wondering if we've actually looked at doing a survey for transit riders themselves, just the transit riders, to see what they think, because they're the ones that are most impacted by it. And then my second point, and I wanted to go on record on this, when Councillor Hammond spoke about number 1 Port Drive, as far as I'm concerned, number 1 Port Drive is off the record for anything we do until SFN is at the table with full consultation. So for me, until that happens, I won't be moving forward on that. And secondly, it is before the courts, because there is a land claim there, and we don't know if SFN wants land or the dollars. So I think we have to be really cognizant of the fact that SFN has not been at the table from the political. It's been there from the staff level. There's been great work done at the staff level, but it has not been done at the political level. And so from my perspective, until SFN is fully consulted with the plans for that area, I don't think we should be moving ahead with anything there. Thank you.
I'm going to go to Mr. Sims just to see if you have that data on breakdown of the data for transit riders that participated in the survey.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yes, I think the comments are well taken, and I believe that there's been some work done as part of the Downtown Mobility Hub that we would report back to you. But staff and regional district staff are working together on the region's transit redevelopment strategy, and that's sort of helping inform this process as well.
Thank you. So I have no additional speakers, so I'm going to speak, and maybe an unusual step as chair, put a motion or a recommendation forward and see if there's a seconder, and then I'll speak to it. just so I'm not wasting my time talking about something that doesn't get seconded. That staff focus on proofing concepts that accommodate a multi-storied mixed-use building on the project site. Seconded by Councillor Hemmens. I've connected with a lot of people on this project. It's a lot of people have been commenting on it. I fear, just in Councillor Bonner's comments there, that we might start to edit things out at a too early of a stage. It's been pretty high-level concept planning, but I think one thing that has come back loud and clear is that people are wanting to see some sort of building, mixed-use, residential, accommodated on the site. And I think ultimately, I think that's a good idea. And there's obviously additional project inputs, but giving the refinement and direction to staff to come back with, again, transit exchange, road work improvements, network changes, but all centered around what would a mixed use, we can all imagine it, commercial, ground floor, commercial oriented, with residential above. It's not rocket science. It does go to creating functional places that if we give them the direction to have a little bit more refined project scope, that they could take all those inputs and provide some really beneficial options for council to actually have debate around, and then the public to chew on and provide some input. Right now, I think it's been good that we've been blue skying, but that lack of particulars does start to produce many unknowns, and if we can get to a more practical and solid place, I think we would really start to crystallize on a really functioning project that has some good public feedback, and hopefully we'll get it to a place of public support. So all that to say, I still think it's at the conceptual stages, but just providing a little more direction would really help refine it and I think get it to an overall better place. I think there's a lot of fear from the public around, and I think rightfully so, around creating spaces that don't perform from an urban design or an urban fabric point of view, but also function in a negative way around a lot of these very real social issues that do have impact on how people feel about a space, how safe they feel, and how it impacts the neighborhood and businesses. So I think we can't ignore that, but we also can't pursue a path where we do nothing around our urban spaces. And so I think there's a path forward here, and that is by, to borrow from Dr. Witty's earlier remark, around creating spaces that animate the areas around them. And to me, this is it. We have there will still be public realm improvements associated with something like this. So put that out there for council's consideration. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder if I could have clarification on the motion. Are you referring to putting the property up for sale for private development, or were you talking about public development of that property? Through
anyone. I'm not used to it. I think there would be numerous options that would absolutely have to be explored, but I think we have working examples where we've been able to secure certain public amenities that we are the project lead on, while also putting out private or reconfiguring parcels to put out for RFP and private development. So I think staff have shown us some models in the past that could be well utilized to see both the public investment around certain public amenities, while also having portions of it, the building and realized through public or private investment.
Thank you.
Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Chair. I will support the motion on the basis that it is simply to give council more information and illuminate our consideration of the numerous and many possibilities for this public space. But I do want to state publicly that I would hate to think that the future decisions around downtown spaces, and particularly open spaces, are going to be determined on the basis of the present failure of 30 and 40 years of social and health policy, which has resulted in the hundreds of individuals who literally live in our streets. If that were the case, there would be no Central Park, there would be no Stanley Park, there would be no public squares in all those European cities that many people have been writing to us about, or examples were used by Dr. Woody earlier today. There would be no public spaces because, after all, the homeless, the poor, and those who disturb the majority of society would be occupying them. So I worry about the concept that we are talking about doing things with too much of our thinking based in our present circumstances. I think Councillor Thorpe's words were wise earlier today when he talked about the pace and the speed with which decisions or consideration may be made. This, as I emphasized earlier, is our premier intersection. I look at all of that land along Terminal Avenue, particularly from Comox to Commercial, which has to be one of the most underutilized and presently, with no disrespect to the current owners, etc., one of the ugliest strips of road through a lovely city, and it is a lovely city, through a lovely city that would, I think, support a great deal of development, which would probably, I'm afraid, end up looking pretty much like the intersection of Commercial and Terminal if it's just, no offense, no matter how attractive, another commercial on the main floor or two, offices, and then apartments above. So I just, as much as I support the motion, I want everyone to consider that we really need to be very imaginative, I think, with what is, again, our premier intersection. But I'll support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I also will certainly support the motion, and I agree with the comments of Mayor Krogh on the lines that this is simply to give us options and more information. And I think many on council have heard a message from the public that they like the idea of mixed-use residential on that site. So it's something that I would certainly like to see us explore. But I come back to my earlier comments that I think when the city entertained obtaining this land, there was certainly consideration that a transit exchange might be appropriate, and maybe it still is. So I don't think that should be put off the table. I would still appreciate information on that and other options for the transit exchange. But again, I think we need to look at best use for the land and what it will accommodate. So on that basis, yes, I will support the motion. Thank you.
Any additional speakers, Council? Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thanks. I'm supportive of the motion. I think that is probably the best use for that spot is some residential, commercial, mixed use. So I'd like to explore opportunities in that direction. Heard from all the delegations, and you know, maybe I'll speak to this after this motion. Thank you.
Seeing no additional speakers, we'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? See none opposed. Motion carries. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you. I just wanted to add some comments here. I just heard from the different delegations and hear the concerns about the transit exchange and then some of the routing of traffic. I guess first for the traffic through that area, I think we need to just keep going at the pace that we're going and look at all options and look deeper into the implications that they'll have. I think that a major priority is to draw people to the downtown and support our local businesses. And so that will be sort of the criteria that I'll be going forward, selecting what's the best design. With the transit exchange, there's strong arguments for putting it in that location. You know, Woodgrove, leases the transit exchange in the north end for $1 for that very reason, because it brings people downtown, or brings people to the mall there. I do hear the concerns of public disorder and that, and I think that we need to investigate that closer. As you know, that is a concern for people at the moment. It's a shame that the transit exchange got off on such a bad foot with the business owners downtown, or some of them, and some community members. I don't think that the project was fully clear in what locations at the start, and it sort of snowballed. But we're in a situation now where there is some public opposition to this, and we need to take that seriously. I don't want to see a large project like this go forward and have, you know, a large portion of the community against it. And so I think it's on us to make a very strong case for why a transit exchange is best located in that spot and not on Front Street, and be very clear about that, so that it's clear why we'd be going forward in that direction. And I think that case needs to be made clear. And I'm not attached to putting a transit exchange in that spot if it's not clear, and I'm open to other options. And would like to hear a little bit more, you know, why Port One Drive, other than it being, you know, a large redevelopment potential for our downtown, why it's not compatible for transit exchange. But we need to flesh that out more, and I think provide something clear to the community to evaluate around. Thank you.
Your Worship.
Thank you, Chair. And I just feel I want to relate this as this discussion is important as we think about these things. And it's a friend of Councillor Turley's who I had coffee with the other day. He is the old Harewood boy who's done well in this community and raised his family here, etc., and who was appalled at the prospect of a transit exchange on that particular site. And was trying to, in conversation, pin me down. Well, are you in favor, are you against it? What do you really want to see there? And I said, not in an evasive way, that I wasn't wed to anything, but that somebody was going to come up with an idea for that property that was exciting, and I would know it when I saw it, and I'd be excited by it. So I really hope that what comes out of today, and the Chair has contributed to it with his motion, is that staff, firstly, won't feel burdened to get an answer next week, but that the community as a whole will actually step back and think about what they'd like to see there, no matter how crazy the idea might be. And I've thrown out a few of them today in the hopes of being provocative, because I emphasize again, and as Mr. Appel and others have emphasized again today, we make a boo-boo here, we'll never get it fixed, and it'll never look right. Whereas if we do something that actually has broad appeal and looks good to us, we'll be proud of. And if that's this council's legacy or this generation's legacy to the beautiful city of Nanaimo, so be it. But I just hope that everyone puts on their thinking hats and thinks about where they've traveled and been, because we could do something wonderful here, or we could do something that will be successful, but frankly, 50 years from now, will look just like an intersection in any other city in North America, as opposed to something we might really be proud of. So I'll leave it at that. I'll shut up. I'm done for the day. And I will, but I'd love to move adjournment in a few minutes.
Well, we're going to go to question period here. But I'll just say thanks for everyone for participating, and I think the interest in this, and thanks to staff. I know some of the things that don't make the public is how great of a design team that has been built around to make sure this project is a success. So I think if we get strong public input with the, and that feeds up to the design team and through to council, I'm very optimistic we'll get a great project. So thank you very much. First we have Les Barclay. I think that's 6B1, which would be the Diana Krall Plaza redevelopment plan.
Okay. Yes, Mayor and Council. It's nice to have in-person question period resume. It's been a fascinating meeting tonight, a little longer than the 3 o'clock finishing time. I told my kids I'd be home. My question pertains to the animated spaces that have been discussed tonight. Particularly 2 points that were made. Mr. Appel's point about his perceived surfeit of public spaces in Nanaimo. I tend to agree that there is, and Dr. Whitty's point about the unanimated space that is Diana Krall Plaza. There is another unanimated space that I would like to know if council has considered, and that is the Pioneer Waterfront Plaza. that I think is equally dead as Diana Krall. We have a public market, the farmers market, 4 months of the year, but 8 months of the year, there's very little that is there, and it is just as sizable, I believe, as Diana Krall Plaza. So, my concern is, again, if we use the Gene Burns space and create another public space, and I think Councillor Turley was saying, well, put food trucks there. Well, Dr. Whitty had suggested put food trucks at Diana Krall, and there is, of course, another public space that we need to use, and that is Bebin Plaza, which is supposed to be redeveloped. So my question to you is, have you considered Pioneer Waterfront Plaza in all of this planning?
I'm going to go through to staff, but I think the answer right now is no. It's one public space at a time, but if there's plans, that would go to staff who might have a better idea.
Chair, I think staff would echo what you're saying. I think we recognize there are areas, and Pioneer Square is another example that could certainly use attention, but the focus right now on the plan is, and as I think we heard earlier today, is Commercial Street right now is the area where, we see the largest demand for public gatherings and public spaces. And I think if we get that right and we're successful, then hopefully, we can deal with the next challenge down the road, which might be Pioneer Park. But right now the focus is on commercial and making sure that it ties in all the projects you heard about today so that we have a successful heart of the community and then work out from there. But absolutely, there are other areas that could use attention, and there's a long list. But
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair?
Yes.
If I may, am I mistaken about the ownership of Pioneer Plaza? Mr. Lindsay?
The worship is referring to the fact that it's under the control of the Port Authority, which is absolutely correct. So again, another complicating factor there, but and something that would have to be addressed if we ever got to that point. Yeah.
Mr. Shaw. I'm not sure what item this is, but I'll trust
under the
you
hub
to speak
project.
to.
Will council reach out then to talk to the SFN about the waterfront property and as well their thoughts on a transportation center?
Go to his worship here as he sits on the POG, but there is regular and continuing conversations with SFN on numerous topics.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to Mr. Shaw for the question. The concept of a transportation hub downtown has been long considered, and certainly I think it's fair to say there have been discussions that have danced around the issue for quite some time, but I would be less than forthcoming if I didn't say that I'm conscious of the fact that many of Snuneymuxw First Nation are tired of having a rail line through their rather tiny bit of land, and I understand that completely, and that continues to be a consideration for Snuneymuxw First Nation. Presently, my understanding is the only thing that's coming along that line is gas, liquid natural gas, which presents a danger to the public. Obviously, I think many of us have thought long and hard it would be lovely to have passenger trains connecting with fast ferries, with Gabriola, with et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I appreciate the sentiment, but this is not one that will move forward easily, but certainly it can be raised at the POG without question in a very specific way around a transportation hub, which is the thrust of your question.
Follow up, Mr. Chair. I know that, a year and a half, it's usually been staff apparently to SFN. Is the answer then City Council will meet with a Nanaimo Council on this? So it's elected to elected talking?
The protocol agreement working group consists of myself, Chief Wise, 2 councillors each, Councillors Thorpe and Armstrong from our side, Councillor Joseph, and Councillor Good, or Councillor Yoakum, I believe might be the representative now, and senior staff. So that's the genesis of the discussions, and obviously things that require discussion further go back to respective councils.
Okay, thank you. One more question, Mr. Chair. At a bus exchange, can we get factual stats, or does staff have them, or the RDN, on riders at the exchange. It is an exchange, so are they getting off one bus, getting on another? And if they are getting off to stay, which of course they are, and do something, how much money, do we have any stats on how much money they would be spending then? Is it somebody going to work? Is it somebody leaving work? Is it somebody visiting a friend, having a coffee? Since this seems to be part of this conversation you're having is, bringing people downtown, which, hey, we all want. And we even want them walking around. Lots of people enjoying, a refurbished commercial street and Crawl Plaza. But how much then, I would like to know, are bus riders that are coming downtown, how much are they spending and how many?
On your first question, I can answer this. Yes, we do track the ridership data to the best that we can, and that's getting better as we move to more digital pass systems. We can figure out where people are starting, where they're going as they plan their trips, and so that all that data is being gathered to the best of our abilities through the current transit redevelopment strategy that's going on with the regional district, but also a partnership with the city of Nanaimo with respect to some certain aspects of that. With respect to your second question, locally, that granularity we don't have. We don't have the data of knowing that much about the ridership. There is some studies around ridership, everything from people that walk, people that cycle, and people that take transit or drive cars and how much they spend in a given area, but we don't have that local data.
Okay, thank you. And actually, just one other point. I believe, too, like many of you do, that commercial and terminal, that is the jewel. That is the heart of our entire city. But there is going to be a lot of density, as we've been told by Mr. Lindsay, and you all know, over at the Portlands, too, with condos, apartments, etc. And if they're not, if they don't have a car, they're going to need some form of means of transportation as well. So I'm just thinking as the city grows, the downtown, having the best option. So thank you all very much for all your time. I do, sincerely.
Thanks, Mr. Shaw. I believe we have one more, a late addition, Mr. Appel? No. Oh, okay. So that brings us to the end of the list. I'm going to go to, there's no other end? I'm going to go to his worship.
Sorry?
To adjourn?
Move adjournment?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Giving you the privilege here.
I did. So moved.
Seconded by Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Oh, it was Don. Did Don have his hand? No.